Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a brutal winter inside a medieval European dungeon, where prisoners must fight not only hunger, but the freezing breath of their own survival. You'll hear the wind whistling through the iron bars, the coughing of souls trying to survive the winter with nothing but fragile faith and a touch of delirium. Trust me, after this story, your 68-degree air conditioner will feel like paradise. Before we begin, take a moment to hit that subscribe button to help the channel grow, and drop a comment telling me where and when you're listening. I'd love to know who's still awake with me on this cold night. Now then, dim the lights, pull up your warmest blanket, pour yourself a hot cup of tea, and let's dive into the final breaths of those souls trapped in the winter dungeons of the Middle Ages. That winter came earlier than any other year. No one knew why, maybe because death forgot to pull up his blanket, so the cold from the north kept spilling down, swallowing the land like a giant beast. Out there, people huddled in their homes, trying to keep the fire alive with their last bundles of wood. But in this ancient stone dungeon, where you and I are living the medieval experience, warmth is as rare as Wi-Fi in those days. You're sitting in a cell so small that if you stretch your legs, you hit the wall. And that wall isn't brick or wood, it's stone. Cold, heartless stone, thick enough that even the howling wind turns into a sinister laugh when it slips through the cracks. Every time you breathe, mist rises, and you swear you can see, your soul trembling, escaping into the air. The cold isn't just on your skin, it seeps into your bones. Your joints crack every time you move. Even your cloth shirt torn to shreds since last month now feels like a paper napkin trying to fight the wind. You remember your first day locked up here, when autumn still had a bit of sunlight left. You laughed then, saying, "Ha, cold? I've survived plenty of winters." But now, you'd apologize to winter with every ounce of your soul. Down the corridor, the sound of chains clinking echoes whenever someone stirs. At first, it scared you. Now, it's your lullaby. You've grown used to it, to the darkness, to the damp, to the smell of rotten straw and the dripping water from the dungeon ceiling. Sometimes a cold drop hits your neck, sending shivers through your whole body, and you chuckle weakly. Ah, a free ice drop. Lovely. The jailer's the same face like a rock, tossing in a piece of stale bread before leaving. Nobody remembers his name, only that whenever he opens the door, a gust of cold air rushes in like a cruel reminder. You're still not dead yet? And each time, you bow your head, hug yourself tight, trying to hold on to what little warmth is left. Sometimes you wonder, is it snowing out there yet? Then you laugh, because what does it matter when even the walls here are frozen solid? If you press your ear against them, you can hear faint cracking sounds, as if the stones themselves are shivering. On the first night, when frost sealed the iron bars, the dungeon went completely silent. No more moans, no more calls. Everyone lay still, listening to each other's breath, slow, faint, filled with despair. You could hear your heart beating, each thump like a drum announcing that winter would last longer than you ever imagined. Someone beside you whispers, "Hey, you still awake?" "Yeah." "You think we'll make it through this winter?" You don't answer, because the answer is already wrapped around your neck in the freezing air. In the corner, a candle flickers weakly, its yellow light casting shadows on the mossy stone walls. The flame trembles like your life about to go out, but still fighting to burn a little longer. You stare at it, thinking, if that flame dies, I'm done for. So you inch closer, warming your trembling hands over it, as if caressing a dying creature. Outside, the snow starts to fall thicker. Each flake touches the iron bars, melts, then freezes again, layering over the old ice like a cold white blanket. It's beautiful, really, if only you weren't behind these bars. You remember that out there, this season means festivals, singing, roasted meat, mead, while here, you're counting water drops falling from the ceiling, like counting down to when you'll freeze solid. Sometimes you dream you're free. You dream of sunlight on your face, the smell of dry hay carried by the wind. But when you wake, your breath hangs in the air, turns to mist, and vanishes. You laugh, your lips cracked from the cold. Amid the numbness, you hear rats scurrying across the straw. Strangely, it makes you happy at least something else is still alive in this frozen tomb. Maybe it's even stronger than you. Then you think, if there's a saint listening, please, Just grant me one warm dream. And the moment you close your eyes, you dream indeed you're sitting by a fire, hearing the wood crackle, snow gently falling outside, and someone places a hand on your shoulder, saying, "You survived." But like all good dreams in this darkness, you wake to the sound of howling wind. The candle's gone out. The dungeon sinks into silence. And winter has only just begun. The wind howls through the crack in the iron door, blowing the last bit of warmth out of the dark room. That sound, it's like someone dragging a long blade across metal, cold and spine-chilling. You curl up in the corner, trying to hide behind the damp straw, but the wind always finds a way in, as if it has a soul, a purpose, and that purpose is to steal whatever warmth you have left. The wind in the dungeon is different from the wind outside. Out there, it passes over snowy fields, rooftops, pine forests. It still carries a trace of freedom. But here, the wind is strangled, forced through rusted bars, so it screams in rage, like the cry of a trapped soul. You shiver. Every gust makes your teeth chatter. You bring your hands to your mouth, trying to hold in the heat, but your hands are as cold as ice. The smell of rust, damp mold, and unwashed bodies blend together into a thick, choking air that feels like drinking melted ice, mixed with despair. A rough cough echoes from the corner of the cell. It bounces off the stone walls, multiplying until it sounds like 10 men coughing at once. You know it's the old prisoner in the next cell, the one who told you he's been locked up 10 years for stealing a loaf of bread. He once said, "At first, you'll hate the wind, then you'll fear it, and finally, you'll miss it, because when the wind stops blowing, it means nothing alive is left in this dungeon." Back then, you thought he was rambling, but now, with the cold crawling into your bones, you understand. The wind is the only thing reminding you there's still a world outside, even if that world has forgotten you. The next gust rushes in and blows out the single candle you've managed to keep alive for days. The light dies instantly. The dungeon sinks into a darkness so thick it feels solid. You can't see anything, only hear the wind through the bars, the faint clink of chains, and your heartbeat pounding so hard it seems to echo through the cell. In the dark, your mind starts playing tricks. You imagine someone sitting beside you, breathing softly. You turn your head, no one's there. But when you close your eyes, you can feel that breath right by your ear. You chuckle weakly, half afraid, half mad. "All right then," you whisper. "If the wind wants to talk, I'm listening." But the wind only answers with a long, drawn-out howl, sweeping through the corridor, fading like a whisper from hell. The cold now isn't just a feeling, it's a living creature. It crawls over your skin, slips under your collar, creeps down your spine, and stays there, giggling every time you shiver. You try to remember what warmth felt like, but the memory is fading like a dream the wind carried away. Somewhere out there, someone's sitting by a fire, baking bread, telling stories, laughing, and you're talking to the wind. The terrifying part is, the wind starts talking back. The hiss through the crack sounds like a whisper. "Colder? Now?" You flinch, pulling the torn cloth over your head, trying to convince yourself it's just your imagination. But then a cold draft snakes down your neck. You gasp, and instantly your own voice bounces off the walls, echoing from every side. The dungeon has its own way of driving people mad. You can't tell which sound is real anymore. In the darkness, something moves, a rustle of straw, the scrape of something crawling across the floor. You hold your breath. Maybe it's a rat, maybe not. The wind blows again. This time, it carries a strange scent, a freezing tang, a mix of snow, rust, and old blood. You realize frost is forming on the walls. The water dripping from the ceiling freezes into long, thin crystals that glimmer faintly in the dim light from the hallway. They look beautiful, almost magical, if you forget that each drop of ice is another piece of your warmth stolen away. A sudden gust hits you, and your head spins. You clutch the stone wall to keep from falling. It's icy, rough, and slick like touching a corpse. You wonder how many hands have touched this same wall, how many souls left invisible prints here, and if yours will be one of them. From the far corner, someone whispers a prayer. You can't see them, but you hear the trembling voice. "Please, just give us a ray of sunlight." Such a small, simple plea, But in this darkness, it sounds like a cry from the depths of the earth. The wind answers with a longer, harsher wail, almost mocking. There is no Sunday. You laugh, the sound echoing, then turning into a fit of coughing. Your throat burns, every breath feels like inhaling ice. When the coughing stops, you sit still, gasping, mind hazy. You start thinking about home or what used to be home. You remember the smell of smoke from the stove, the thick blanket your mother wrapped you in, the feeling of a hand on your shoulder saying, "It's cold, come inside." Now you are inside indeed, the stone house of hell, with iron doors, frozen walls, and the wind as its master. Another gust comes, gentler this time, brushing your hair. And strangely, you're not afraid anymore. The cold has crossed the line of pain. Now, it's become your companion. You start mumbling to it, as if the wind understands. "You want me dead, huh?" you ask. The wind hisses softly, like a dry laugh. "Well," you mutter back, voice low, "I'm not exactly alive either." You chuckle, and something in that laugh doesn't sound human anymore. You know you're losing your mind, but you don't feel sad about it. In a place where warmth is gone, sanity doesn't matter. The night drifts on. The wind keeps howling through the cracks, steady, rhythmic, like the dungeon's own breath. And you, a small, fragile prisoner, sit in the frozen dark, listening as the wind steals each breath you take, calmly, like it's playing the lullaby of an endless winter. You're still sitting there, your back pressed against the freezing stone wall, eyes wide open in the thick, suffocating darkness. The cold isn't just on your skin anymore, it's buried deep inside your bones, making every movement creak like rusted hinges. Around you, the other prisoners huddle just like you do, wrapped in scraps of cloth so tattered you can't tell whether they're shirts, blankets, or floor rags. Someone's cut a hole in their cloth and pulled it over their head like a wandering monk lost in hell. Another man has only half a sleeve left, his other arm wrapped in straw, looking both pitiful and absurd. But no one laughs anymore, not even you, who once laughed when others shivered. Now, every laugh freezes before it can leave your throat. You glance at the man beside you, his nose bright red from the cold, lips purple, eyes half open, as if staring into some distant, unreachable place. He's wrapped in a mouldy brown sack, maybe once a grain bag. Every time the wind slips in, the edge of the cloth flutters like a white flag of surrender. You pull your own shirt closer. It used to be grey. Now it's stained with dirt and torn at the shoulder, the collar frayed so thin it could rip off with a tug. But you hold on to it, because it's the only thing left you can still call a shirt. In the corner, a young prisoner tries to warm his hands over a tiny candle stuck in a tin can. The dim light dances across his gaunt face, revealing deep, hollow eyes, the kind that know hope is a cruel joke. He brings his hands close to the flame, then jerks them back, whispering, "Hot," his voice trembling, as if he's just witnessed a miracle. You see smoke rising from his palms, and for a fleeting moment, everyone falls silent, just to hear the faint crackle of burning skin. Someone lets out a dry laugh. "Hot, really? Let me borrow that candle. I want to remember what that feels like." But the young man just shakes his head, shielding the flame as if guarding the last treasure in the world. The old prisoner in the corner sighs, his voice rough and broken. Don't blame him. In here, a flame is worth more than gold. You nod, even though no one can see it. The wind keeps slipping through the bars. Every gust feels like a knife. The thin cloth doesn't stop the cold, it just makes you feel like you're wrapping yourself up for death. You pull your knees to your chest, hugging them tight, trying to create heat from your own breath. Your mouth is dry, your lips cracked. Every time you lick them, you taste the salty sting of blood. The metallic tang of your own body mixes with your breath, forming the strange, bitter flavor of survival. And oddly enough, you realize you're still alive, and that realization exhausts you more than the cold itself. In the middle of the cell, a big man, probably once a soldier, sits with his back against a stone pillar. He's trembling, arms wrapped around his knees, staring blankly at the ground. His coat has a few patches of fur sewn on, which should make it warmer, but instead, it just lets the wind in easier. He mutters softly, maybe to himself. Once, I laughed at villagers shivering in the cold. Now I understand. The cold is an enemy without a face. It kills slower than a knife, but it never misses. No one replies, but everyone hears. His words echo in your head. Spreading like mist cold doesn't need a weapon, because it is death itself. You look around, searching for something, anything warm. But the candle is gone, leaving only a thin wisp of smoke curling in the air. The straw beneath you is so damp you could wring water from it. You touch it, and your fingers stiffen, numb, almost lifeless. Every motion feels like needles stabbing your fingertips. You blow on your hands, trying to wake the blood inside them, but even your breath feels cold. You laugh, a dry, raspy sound that hangs in the silence like a sigh. From the other side of the dungeon, a faint moan rises. Someone's feverish. You can't see them, but you hear each labored breath, each trembling gasp. A weak voice calls out, "Is anyone there?" No one answers. In this place, every person has just enough strength left to keep from collapsing. Compassion, kindness, they've all been strangled by the cold. But still, you listen. And somewhere deep inside, something tiny flickers a faint spark, like the last light of a dying candle. You suddenly remember freedom. When winter came, you used to wear that old wool coat, sit by the fire, and complain, "Why is it so cold?" Now, you'd give anything to go back to that moment just to slap yourself and say, "Appreciate that gentle cold, you fool. The cold you know now isn't a season, it's a destiny." A strong gust blows through, scattering dust, straw, and groans. You lift your head and look through the bars. Outside is a night buried in white snow. No stars in the sky, only grey clouds hanging low like coffins suspended upside down. Snowflakes drift past, cling to the iron bars, melt, then roll down as droplets hitting the stone floor in a steady rhythm, tick, 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 like a clock, counting down your remaining life. You take a deep breath, the taste of metal and mildew flooding your lungs. A cough bursts out, tearing through your chest. It feels like your lungs are ripping open. When it stops, you lean back, gasping, staring at the moss-covered ceiling where the droplets still fall. You whisper, almost to yourself, "I wonder if I'll still be breathing by morning." Then you smile, a faint, cracked smile, tinged with madness. If not, at least, I'll be warm somewhere else. The stone floor is ice cold and rough, like a living creature trying to swallow your last bit of warmth. Every time you touch the ground, it feels like pressing your hand onto pure ice so cold it burns. You try to lift yourself up, but you can't, your joints feel frozen solid. The chill from the stone seeps upward, crawling through your legs, slipping through the thin fabric, sinking into your bones, then reaching your heart. It feels like hundreds of icy snakes slithering across your body, giggling as they watch you shiver. Your feet have long since gone numb, replaced by the sharp sting of pins and needles. You try to move your toes, but you're not even sure they're still there. Someone once said that before freezing to death, a person starts to feel warm. If that's true, you think your turn must be close. Every muscle in your body feels stiff. Each breath you take fogs the air, then vanishes instantly in the thick darkness. You can hear your own heartbeat slow, heavy as if your heart itself is freezing. Around you, the wind still howls through the bars. Chains clink faintly. Someone stirs, then falls still again. No one speaks anymore. Even words waste heat. You pull your legs close, hugging them tight for warmth, but the stone floor presses against your spine, sending dull aches through your back. You rub your hands together, trying to make friction, but the more you rub, the colder they get. Your skin is split, bleeding, and the moment blood touches the air, it freezes. You let out a dry, gravelly laugh. The cold doesn't kill with temperature, it kills with patience. It gnaws at you slowly, inch by inch, from your feet to your head, from your skin to your heart, forcing you to watch your body surrender piece by piece. In the corner, an old prisoner lies motionless. The wind blows, lifting the edge of his shirt. No one knows if he's still breathing, and no one dares to check. You remember how, just that afternoon, he was still mumbling prayers. Now, only the wind answers. You close your eyes, trying to imagine yourself somewhere else, but even imagination freezes. Every image in your mind is locked in ice, even the memory of warmth. You can no longer recall what sunlight feels like. The sun, something you once cursed while working in the fields, now feels like a luxury so distant it hurts just to think about it. You press your hand to the floor again, as if to confirm you still exist. It's cold. So cold that you can hear your skin sticking to the stone, like two pieces of ice touching. You pull your hand away, leaving behind a small patch of torn skin, a streak of red. The blood oozes slowly, then hardens into a thin, jelly-like layer. You sigh. At least there's still blood, you think. Means I'm not dead yet. Another prisoner lets out a rough chuckle. If you want to know you're alive, touch the stone. If it feels cold, you're alive. If it feels warm, you're about to die. The room chuckles softly, though no one knows if it's laughter or fear. The sound fades, swallowed by the frost. You shift, trying to find a spot that's less cold, but it's useless. Every inch of the cell is the same, a frozen tomb. The stone beneath your back feels like it's breathing slowly, steadily, each pulse sending the chill deeper into your blood. Maybe, from the outside, someone might think the prisoners here are just sleeping. But they're not. This is the kind of sleep that never ends. You don't know how long you've been sitting like this. Time doesn't pass in days, here it passes in moments when you think, I can't take this anymore. And every time you think that's the limit, the cold proves there is no limit. In a place like this, a human is just a candle, and the stone is the wind. Every time you lean against the wall, your warmth seeps into it, and you know you're feeding it. The stone drinks it in, swallows it, like some invisible beast. You start talking to the floor, half joking, half delirious. You like me that much, huh? Then eat slowly. Of course, no one answers. But in your mind, you hear a whisper. I'm not eating you. I'm just taking back what you dropped your warmth. You laugh again. Maybe you've gone mad. But madness is a kind of warmth too. It helps you forget the cold. Outside, the snow piles up, burying the prison door. The wind shifts, sweeping across the floor, carrying a layer of frost that makes each stone crackle like breaking bones. A drop of water falls from the ceiling onto your forehead, so cold it shocks you awake. You look up and see the droplets freeze before they even hit the ground. Each one is a dagger, stabbing at reality, reminding you that you're here, in this stone dungeon, where warmth is the rarest thing in the world. Somewhere in the dark, someone starts to sing, a shaky, tuneless hum maybe to drown out the sound of their own chattering teeth. You listen, and for a fleeting second, that sound feels like a tiny spark glowing in your chest. But then another gust of wind blows through, and it takes everything with it. The warmth disappears, the sound dies, and the stone goes back to its work, draining life away, patiently, coldly, without hurry. You lie still, not because you want to, but because you can't move anymore. The cold has become a part of you now, your skin, your bones. You realize there's no line between you and the stone anymore. Everything is cold. Everything is silent. And only the wind, the stone, and the slow crawl of death remain, whispering its cruel lullaby of an endless winter. The dungeon feels like the belly of a beast, swallowing every trace of light, every sound, leaving behind only the slow, dying breaths of those being digested alive. The darkness is so thick you can feel it not with your eyes, but with your skin. It clings to you like a damp mist, cold and heavy, making even breathing a burden. In this place, light does not exist. No fire, no candles, not a single spark. Even flame itself, the symbol of life, seems to have abandoned this place long ago, perhaps because even it could not bear the cold. You can hear every breath around you. Each exhale is a faint cloud of smoke, each inhale a battle for survival. Some breathe with a rattle, some in short bursts, and some no longer at all, and when a breath stops, no one dares to check. The wind still howls outside, sliding through the iron bars, carrying the wailing of winter nights. It sounds like the lament of forgotten souls. You curl into yourself, trying to trap the last remnants of warmth in your chest. But with every breath out, you feel as if a piece of your soul leaves with it. Time here is no longer measured in hours or days, but in how many people stop breathing. You never see their faces, but when one breath ceases, the air grows lighter, not because someone is gone, but because death has stolen another trace of warmth from the cell. You start counting your own breaths to know you're still alive. 1, 2, 3. Each inhale stabs your chest with 1,000 icy needles. Each exhale feels like your blood is cooling. In the corner, someone whispers through fading breath, "We're nothing more than dying lamps." His voice is as weak as a falling leaf. You want to reply, but you can't. Your throat is dry, your mouth stiff. The words freeze inside your head, like ice that refuses to melt. You can only answer with a long sigh, watching the thin white mist rise from your lips, fragile, ghostly, and gone in seconds. The darkness is so thick you can't tell wall from man. You stretch out your hand and see nothing, only emptiness. Eyes are useless now. You live by sound, by the rhythm of heartbeats, by the faint groans around you. Sometimes you hear the clink of cold metal chains shifting as someone shivers. That sound comes at intervals, steady as a heartbeat, marking the passage of time. No one speaks anymore. Words cost breath, and breath is worth more than gold. Only the sound of breathing and the wind remains. The wind slips through the bars, brushing over every body like an invisible hand, checking who's dead and who's still clinging on. Each time it passes, your body jerks involuntarily. Your lips tremble not from fear, but because your muscles are too cold to obey you. You try to inhale deeply, but your lungs are clenched tight. The freezing air slices your chest like a knife. In the haze between waking and delirium, you think you hear church bells from far away. The sound is faint, thin, but it makes your heart tremble. You don't know if it's real or just a dream, but you follow that sound in your mind, imagining yourself somewhere else. A snowy square filled with candlelight, the smell of baked bread, laughter echoing through the night. The image lasts only a moment before the wind returns, sweeping it away, leaving only the howling and the dark. You open your eyes wide, desperate to see even the faintest glimmer of light, but there's nothing, only the suffocating black. Your eyes start inventing light instead, tiny glowing dots drifting before you. You know it's just your brain starving for oxygen, but you let yourself believe they're the souls of the dead, coming to warm the living. A soft breeze brushes your hair, and for a second, it feels like someone gently touched your head. You flinch, look around, but no one's there. Only the cold, wrapping tighter, like a death shroud. A prisoner near the door coughs a dry, heavy sound and then stops. You hear the dull thud of his body hitting the ground. No one moves. Silence after death isn't frightening anymore. It's ordinary, like breathing. In the dark, you close your eyes not to sleep, but to imagine light. You picture a flame, small but steady, just enough to illuminate your face. The flame flickers, not real, but in your mind, it's enough to warm an entire winter. You hold on to that image, afraid that if you let it go, you'll end up like the others' lamps that have gone out. You don't know if it's night or day anymore, and it doesn't matter. The only thing that remains is the slow, fading rhythm of breath, the breath of those who've lost all hope, surviving only by instinct. Those faint, misty breaths mingle with the darkness, fading, returning, fading again. A mournful rhythm with no musician, yet every soul in the dungeon plays their part. And within that silent symphony, you feel yourself slowly dissolving until you can no longer tell where you end, where your breath ends, or where the darkness begins. Sleep in the dungeon isn't like the sleep of free men. It doesn't come from peace, but from exhaustion when the body can no longer endure, and the mind only wishes to escape. For a moment, the knife edge cold. You lie on a bed of rotting straw, soaked through and reeking like dead earth. Every time you move, it rustles, sticking to your damp skin and the sweat of fear. Beneath the straw, the stone is still cold, so cold you can almost feel it breathing, rhythmically pulling the warmth out of your flesh. You close your eyes, hoping for a few moments of rest, but even the darkness in your mind is as thick as the one around you, filled with the wind, the coughing, and the endless dripping of water from the ceiling. Each drop falls steadily, drip, 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 like the heartbeat of a demon. Every sound jolts you awake, leaving you unsure if you're dreaming or still awake. Next to you, another prisoner tries to sleep. He's curled up, knees to his chest, his breathing so faint you think he's gone. But then he groans, a low, broken sound, half dreaming, half living. You hear him murmur in his sleep, "Mother, don't close the door. It's cold." That sentence echoes in your mind, a cruel reminder that somewhere out there, There's still a warm world you'll never return to. You want to sleep truly, but the cold and the sounds won't allow it. Every time you drift off, images flood back. Rats scurrying across your chest, cold droplets splashing your face, chains clinking in the dark, and the moans of those who've already lost half their souls. You lie still, listening to the water drip. Some drops hit the stone floor with a dry tick, others land on you icy, making your whole body twitch. You raise a hand to shield your face, but the water still finds its way through your fingers, as if it knows where you are. The damp air of the dungeon mixes with the stench of men, rusted iron, and dried blood. The air is so thick you breathe shallowly, afraid of drawing in the taste of death that hangs in every breath. A rat scurries past, its eyes glinting faintly in the dark. You watch it with a dull stare. For a moment, you envy it, at least it might find a hole to escape through. You let out a quiet laugh, more air than sound, because your throat feels like sand. Sleep flees once again. Somewhere in the darkness, you hear a soft snore, weak and uneven. At first it irritates you, but then it becomes something else, a strange comfort. It proves that someone beside you is still alive. In total darkness, just hearing another living sound is enough to remind you you're not completely gone. You pull the torn cloth over yourself. The straw scratches and stings your skin. You try to wrap yourself tighter, pretending it's a thick blanket in a warm room. But even imagination grows tired. It only lasts a few breaths before fading back into the frozen present. The water keeps dripping. Each drop stabs through time, slow, merciless. Another prisoner shifts, his foot brushing against a chain. The metal clinks, echoing off the walls, spreading through the dungeon like a death bell. You flinch, your heart races, then slows again. Everything inside you slows, your blood, your breath, your thoughts, as if the world itself is freezing with you. In a half-dream, you find yourself standing in a snowy field. The sky is grey, the wind gentle, and you hear footsteps behind you. You turn, there's a woman smiling, arms open wide. You try to move toward her, but your feet are stuck. You look down, the straw and stone are dragging you down. The dream shatters. You wake up, realizing you're still in the dungeon, lying on the damp, foul straw. Your jaw clenched so tight your teeth ache. A drop of water lands on your lips, icy cold. You lick it instinctively, and a faint laugh escapes you. That's the only drink you'll get tonight. The water dripping from the ceiling feels like pity from the heavens, just enough to keep you alive, enough to prolong your suffering one more day. You hear someone whispering a prayer. The words are unclear, trembling. Please, let me sleep, just for one night. You don't know who it is, maybe the man beside you, or maybe it's you, talking in your own dream. Every voice blends together now, melting into the dark, echoing like ghosts. Finally, your body begins to surrender. Your eyelids grow heavy, your mind fades. You drift into sleep, but even there, the cold follows, clinging like a ghost. You dream of lying on the same straw bed, but now the straw has turned to ice, and every breath you exhale becomes white mist floating toward the ceiling. You reach for it, but it vanishes, leaving only the steady dripping above your head. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop is a countdown of life, steady, cold, and indifferent. You sleep, but never truly rest. In the dark, your faint breathing mingles with the dripping water, forming a mournful melody of the winter dungeon, where souls still dream of warmth, even if only in restless sleep, among rotten straw and frozen stone. When the first light of morning fails to reach you, you realize you've survived another night only because you're still breathing. But in this frozen dungeon, each breath is no longer a sign of life. It's proof that you're still chained to this earthly hell. You open your eyes. There's no sun, only a faint, ghostly light seeping through snow-covered bars. It's not enough to see faces, only to see your own breath rising in pale white wisps, swirling and vanishing like weary souls trying to escape a body too tired to keep living. You exhale again. The mist drifts slowly, thin as a veil between life and death. For a moment, you watch it and imagine that it's your spirit leaving this miserable shell, but then the cold wind blows, forcing it back into your chest. You smile bitterly. Not that easy, you whisper. Even death has to wait in line in this place. Around you, other breaths rise together. Dozens of ghostly plumes float and merge in the air, colliding, mingling and fading. In the dim light, the sight is almost beautiful if you didn't know it was the breath of dying men. Some lie still, breathing so softly you have to look closely to see the smoke. Others cough violently, their breath breaking into fragments. All of it weaves together into a slow, mournful dance of souls graceful, sad, and utterly hopeless. You sit up, your joints crack like splitting wood. Your body feels like a block of ice. Every movement brings a new stab of pain. Your vision is blurry, your throat dry, your lips cracked. You lick them, and the taste of blood seeps through salty, metallic, bitter sweet. The wind slips through the iron bars, bringing with it a fresh, cutting cold that wrinkles your skin like frozen earth. You inhale deeply, the air slices your lungs. It hurts, but at least it means you still feel something. A prisoner beside you mutters, his voice rough as gravel. You look like you just coughed up your soul. You glance over, his eyes are bloodshot, and his breath steams like a wounded animal's. You give a hoarse chuckle, and you look like you dropped yours somewhere. Both of you laugh, but the laughter dies quickly. The cold doesn't allow joy, it strangles it like an invisible hand. In the corner, someone doesn't rise anymore. His thin body is curled up, mouth slightly open, a faint trace of frost still clinging to his lips. Perhaps he just exhaled his final breath, his soul drifting out with it, and this time, the wind didn't bring it back. The jailer opens the door, his face expressionless. He walks past each prisoner, nudges the corpse with his boot. No response. He nods, signaling two others to drag it away. The sound of the body scraping against the stone floor is like fabric rubbing over bone. No one looks up. They just bow their heads and keep breathing, keep releasing pale mist into the air, keep proving they're still trapped here. You lower your gaze to your hands. The skin is bluish, your fingers trembling. You bring them to your mouth and breathe on them, but the warmth turns to mist before it touches your skin. Damn it, you murmur. Even my breath doesn't want to stay. You look around, everyone's the same. Faint silhouettes with wisps of white drifting up, vanishing. The whole dungeon looks like a living graveyard, filled with ghosts that haven't yet realized they're dead, still breathing, waiting for their turn. Water still drips from the ceiling. Each droplet splashes, scattering faint reflections of snowlight from outside. A few prisoners close their eyes, trying to sleep again, but can't. The darkness presses down. The cold makes even dreams feel distant. Someone whispers a prayer, their voice trembling like a dry branch in the wind. Dear God, let this breath still hold a little warmth. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. In a place where even light refuses to enter, prayer feels like talking to stone. Yet the whisper continues fragile, fading, merging with the sound of breathing, forming a cold chorus of despair. You tilt your head toward the narrow slit of light through the bars. Outside, the sky is grey, snow still falling softly. Each flake that lands on the metal rings with a tiny ting, a funeral bell for souls slipping away. You lift your hand, reaching for the light, but touch only cold air. Another breath leaves you white, hazy, fading. In that instant, you realize a human being is nothing but a cracked vessel holding warmth and breath. The most fragile thing of all is the true soul. A gust of wind rushes in, scattering the white mists. They merge, twist, and vanish in an instant. The dungeon falls silent again. You keep breathing, but it feels hollow, empty. Each inhale and exhale is just a reflex now, stripped of meaning. You look around and see only hunched figures, sunken eyes, and white wisps rising, disappearing, drifting out of the world bit by bit. And then it hits you. This isn't a prison for bodies, it's a pit for souls, where even breath itself is not free to leave. In that thick, suffocating darkness, coughing is the only sound that proves someone is still alive. At first, it's just a few dry, scattered coughs so faint they could be mistaken for stones falling from the ceiling. But then it spreads, like an invisible fire burning inside the frost. One person coughs, then two, then three. Soon, the whole dungeon joins in, a ragged, rasping symphony, the music of lungs slowly tearing apart in the merciless cold. You sit with your back against the wall, hands clutching your chest. The chill has sunk deep into your lungs, and every breath stabs like a knife. Your first cough escapes like the snap of a dead branch. Pain, sharp, deep, cutting through your insides. You bend over, coughing again and again, until your vision blurs. Your throat burns raw, and when you wipe your mouth, your palm comes away sticky and dark red. Blood. You stare at it in the dim morning light leaking weakly through the snow-covered bars. That colour red is strange here. In a world of grey and white, it's the only thing that looks alive. But you don't feel pride, just dread. The metallic scent fills your nose, mixing with the mouldy air of stone and straw, making you gag. You glance to the side and see another prisoner coughing too. Each cough splits the silence. He lowers his head, and when he looks up again, there's a streak of blood down his chin. "Guess we match now," he rasps, smiling crookedly. Both of you know there's nothing funny about it. The sickness spreads as fast as the cold. No one knows who caught it first, and no one can avoid it. Even the strongest collapse now, clutching their chests, coughing until their voices crack. Every breath in the dungeon is no longer the breath of the living. It's the breath of decay, of bodies slowly rotting in silence. The wind carries the smell of iron and sweat. Drops of water fall from the ceiling, mixing with the blood on the stone floor, spreading into dark brown stains. You try to sleep, but the coughing won't let you. Each time you drift off, it jerks you awake again, your own cough tearing you from the edge of rest. Your throat burns, your lungs are hot, yet your skin is frozen. The feeling is maddening fire inside, ice outside. You don't know how much longer your body can endure. Every time you cough, your vision darkens, as though your blood is turning to mist. An old prisoner, the one who survived 3 winters, speaks weakly, his voice barely more than a breath. It's the cold plague. Comes when the dungeon's too still, too damp, too long without the Sunday. You don't ask anything. You know that naming it changes nothing. The jailer still comes by, tossing scraps of food like he's feeding beasts. He peers through the bars, frowns at those coughing, then slams the door shut. The cold doesn't only come from the wind, it comes from human eyes. Days pass, no one counts how many. The coughing becomes the dungeon's heartbeat. It echoes day and night, loud, soft, then gone. Each time a cough falls silent, you know someone stopped breathing. But no one cries out. They're too tired, too weak, and fear has become as natural as breathing. Somewhere, someone tries to sing a song without tune, just a hoarse whisper between fits of coughing. When the wind stops, we'll be warm. When the ice melts, we'll be free. He makes it halfway through before choking, then silence. You lower your head, staring at your trembling hands. Every cough brings more blood. You've grown used to its smell, too used to wipe it away. Sometimes, you stare at the red stains on the stone and imagine they're flowers, the only ones that could bloom here. Flowers of blood, flowers of winter, flowers of those dying, still trying to take root in the stone. The cold blurs the line between waking and delirium. At times, you hear someone calling your name, a gentle, familiar voice. You turn. No one's there. Only coughing, echoing from every corner like waves rising and falling. The dungeon has become one giant lung, each person a decaying cell. The air is thick, suffocating, each breath a gamble with life. When night falls, the coughing grows heavier. Groans, gasps, and ragged breaths blend into a wild, fevered symphony. You sit clutching your chest, eyes closed, trying to remember the voice of someone, anyone from the world outside. But memory has faded. All you can recall is the sound of your own cough. And in that moment, you realize it's the only prayer God still hears in this place. By morning, you wake to find the prisoner beside you has gone stiff. Dried blood stains his lips. You stare at him for a long while, then slowly cough up another mouthful of blood. "Sorry," you whisper. "I didn't cough quietly enough for you to sleep." No one laughs. Only the wind whistles through the iron door, carrying with it the echoes of unfinished coughs like the dying song of souls dissolving into the cold mist. That dungeon is no longer just a prison, it's a giant steam bath in the middle of winter. Don't think winter is all about cold, oh no. When you've got a fever, you get to experience the natural sauna of the Middle Ages. Your head's at 104 degrees, while the air around you is 39. A perfect combination of hellfire and deep freeze. You're shivering, you're sweating, you're freezing. You don't know whether to cover yourself or strip down, and in the end, you pick the middle ground. Lie flat, like a log, and just let fate decide. The fever makes you see things differently. The stone walls begin to breathe. The rotten straw starts to dance. The shadows of the iron bars on the floor look like a harp, and you swear you can hear it playing. The tune's off-key, a bit screechy, but still better than the coughing chorus. You turn to the prisoner beside you and ask, "You hear the music too?" He opens his eyes, stares at you like you're a talking potato, and croaks, "That's my stomach growling." So both of you laugh weakly, but genuinely. In a place where coughing up blood is the morning greeting, laughter feels like luxury, and you feel like a jester in a zombie festival. Every time you laugh, your head burns hotter, your vision blurs, and in the haze, you see the jailer in a dream riding a snow bull, holding a steaming pot of soup, singing as he eats, while you crawl behind him begging, "Just one spoonful, please. I swear I won't escape, I just want to escape this fever." But he only laughs, the bull vanishes, and you're left lying in the straw, mumbling like a madman. One spoon, just one spoon. The next wave of fever takes you somewhere else. You're walking through snow, no chains, no walls, just endless white and open sky. You reach out to catch snowflakes, but instead, pieces of bread fall from above. You shout with joy like a child, scoop them up, but when you bite down, it's stone. Cold, brittle, and tasteless, just like your life right now. You wake up with a pebble in your mouth and sigh. Crispy, sure, but hard to swallow. The others look at you, some even laugh. One murmurs, "At least he still jokes. I can't even remember who I am anymore." And so they start talking nonsense just to forget the fever. One says he was a soldier, another claims he was a blacksmith, and one insists, with absolute conviction, "I was a king." Everyone nods, no one argues. In the dungeon, you don't correct dying men, let them be kings in their minds for a few minutes if it helps them smile. You decide to join in. "I used to be a cook," you say. "My specialty? Wind porridge." The dungeon erupts in faint laughter. A dry, fragile laughter echoing in the dark. The kind of sad laughter that somehow warms you a little. Someone adds, "I was a soup maker. Tears were my main ingredient." "Must have been salty," you reply. More laughter, longer this time. More real. Then someone coughs, and the laughter goes out like a candle. But its warmth lingers. You realize that even in fever, people can still find a way to laugh, not because they're happy, but because if they don't laugh, their minds will explode. The heat in your head makes you dizzy. You lean back against the wall, eyelids heavy. Sweat drips down, but the moment it touches the air, it freezes. You touch your hair, it's stiff, like frost-covered straw. You mumble, "Am I roasting or freezing?" No one answers, but someone chuckles softly. Night falls, the fever remains. You lie among the faint breaths of the others, staring at the mossy ceiling. The water keeps dripping, drip, 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 the saddest lullaby in the world. But through your fever haze, it sounds different. The drops fall into rhythm. Rhythm becomes melody. Melody becomes words. Sleep, sleep. When you wake, it'll be warm again. You smile faintly, knowing it's a lie, but it's fine. In this place, sometimes lies are the only thing that keeps you alive. Before sleep takes you, the man beside you whispers, "If I die tomorrow, don't put me near the door. I hate the wind." You mutter back, half dreaming, "Fine, but if I go first, don't cover me with too much straw. I hate the heat." Both of you chuckle, laughing through fever, laughing in a frozen hell. And for that brief, fragile moment, your pale breaths rise into the air, dissolve, but this time they don't feel cold anymore. If the cold is a silent killer, then hunger is its talkative accomplice, the one that never shuts up, talking all day, all night, right from inside your stomach. The growling in your gut echoes through the dungeon like the most ridiculous soundtrack of winter. At first, it's gentle, a soft gurgle, like a cat meowing for food. But after a few days, it turns to grr, then rrr, and finally becomes a full-blown choir. Every morning, instead of birdsong, you're treated to the Symphony of Stomach, no 1-inch B-flat minor. You glance down at yourself honestly. If there were a mirror here, you wouldn't dare look. Your ribs stick out so clearly you could play them like a piano. The thinnest prisoner beside you props his chin on his hand and rasps, "You know, if I lose a bit more weight, I might disappear altogether." You smirk and reply, "Great, then you won't have to escape." Both of you chuckle weakly. It's a frail laugh, but still a laugh, one of the last living sounds in this mouldy air. The food hasn't changed, if you can even call it food. A chunk of bread harder than stone, a cup of water murkier than clouds, and sometimes, if luck's on your side, something that might once have been a potato. You pick up the bread and tap it on the floor. Clonk. It sounds exactly like a hammer on brick. The man next to you snickers. "Don't eat that, you could build a wall with it." You shrug. "Better that than let my stomach keep singing." Then you bite down. Crack. Your teeth rattle like dry twigs. You swallow, throat burning, and realize you've just eaten half a tooth. You cough lightly, then mutter, "No problem, extra calcium." Hunger turns everything in the dungeon into food in your mind. Stone walls, salt crackers, rotten straw, dried noodles, the cold wind sneaking in, the smell of burnt toast. Once, you swear you saw a rat scurry by, and the air filled with the imaginary aroma of roasted meat. You eyed it like a chef spotting fresh ingredients. But the rat vanished faster than hope. You sighed. Can't blame it. No one stays long in a restaurant like this. One prisoner, a former hunter, starts talking about the game meat he used to eat. His descriptions are so vivid that everyone's mouths start watering. "Deer meat," he says, "grilled over charcoal, the fat sizzling, dripping down with that smell so good even wolves would beg for a bite." The old man in the corner groans. "Shut up, you're insulting my imagination." You whisper, "Let him talk, I want to picture the fat melting a bit more." Everyone bursts out laughing. The laughter ripples through the dungeon like flickering fire, warm, if only in the mind. By nightfall, when bellies roar loud enough to shake the walls, someone brings up a grimly serious topic. If one of us dies, do we share the meat? The room falls silent. Then someone coughs and says, "If he stinks, you can have my share." Laughter bubbles up like water. No one really means it, but joking about it somehow makes the hunger less cruel. In this darkness, where there's nothing left to lose, humor becomes a kind of bread for the soul. You lie down, arms wrapped around your stomach, listening to it rumble like distant thunder. You try to remember what it felt like to be full. A warm meal, soup's aroma, soft bread, the sound of laughter at a table. But the memory fades, erased by your own breath. Now every dream is about food. You dream of a feast, long tables, roasted meat, bread, wine. You sit down, smile with joy, lift a bite to your mouth, and wake up clutching damp straw. You sigh, put a piece in your mouth, chew. Not good, but not the worst. Sometimes, to pass the time, the prisoners play the menu game. Each one names the first thing they'll eat when they're free. The man on your left says, "Chicken soup, whole chicken, no bones spared." The one on your right says, "Cake, the whole thing, no sharing." When it's your turn, you take a deep breath and say solemnly, "Cold rice, just plain cold rice, but with a splash of fish sauce." The cell goes quiet for 2 seconds, then erupts in laughter. "Fancy, man!" someone shouts. When the laughter fades, everyone sighs not out of sorrow, but because laughing warms their chests and quiets their bellies, at least for a moment. Late at night, you sit listening to the wind whistle through the bars. Hunger has become a familiar companion, so familiar you've given it a name. "Hey, belly," you say softly. "You're singing a little too loud tonight." You pat it gently, like calming a child. It answers with a long, gurgling growl. You smile. All right, tomorrow I'll treat you to an imaginary soup." And so, in that frozen dungeon, among skeletal bodies and foggy breaths, the raspy laughter of starving men still echoes. They are truly hungry, hungry enough to see bread in the clouds, yet they still laugh. Laughing with each other, with fate, just to remind themselves they're still human. Hunger can make them shiver, but it can't silence them. Because here, when there's nothing left to eat at least, you can still feed on words. If there's one way to know you're still alive in this frozen dungeon, it's by counting how many fingers you've got left. Sounds funny, doesn't it? But it's true. You wake up in the morning, look down at your hands, and think, wait a minute, didn't I have more fingers last night? The cold here isn't just cold anymore, it's strategic. It chooses its victims carefully, one finger at a time, slow and gentle, like a chef plucking herbs to prepare his latest dish. Boiled prisoner hand? At first, it's only numbness. So numb that even if you held a flame to it, you'd feel nothing. You touch the stone wall with your fingertips, no pain. Maybe I've become a superhero, you think, eyes gleaming in the darkness. But when you lift your hand toward the faint light slipping through the iron bars, that tiny spark of joy dies instantly. Your fingertips are black, not the healthy kind of tanned black, but the dark, burnt kind, like someone dipped your hand into a pot of overcooked coffee. You force a smile and say to the man beside you, "Hey, look, I've got charcoal fingers now." He glances over and replies dryly, "Nice. We'll use them for firewood later." The cold isn't joking. Each day, it takes a little more of you. Yesterday, touching metal still hurt. Today, it doesn't. Tomorrow, you might grab a chunk of ice and feel nothing except the smell of your own flesh burning as frost eats into it. Then one morning, you wake up, lift your hand, and see a finger missing. Not stolen, not broken, just gone. As if your own body decided it had enough and tried to escape. You stare at the finger lying on the straw, blank-faced, and whisper, "Go on. I get it. It's boring here anyway." The man beside you picks it up, examines it like an antique, and says, "If I collect 10 of these, do you think the jailer will trade me a bowl of soup?" The whole cell laughs softly. Weak laughter, but still laughter. In a place where anyone could die from the cold, joking about death is the only defense left. Someone adds, "Careful, your toes might quit next." You answer, "Good, one less thing to tie shoes with." Frostbite doesn't hit all at once. It sneaks in, tricks you. First, your hands feel cold, you rub them, blow on them, thinking it's fine. Then blood stops flowing. Your skin turns from red to white, then purple, then black. By the time you realize it, it's too late. You look at your hands, they look like burnt potatoes. You try to snap your fingers, no sound. Try to make a fist, no movement. In the end, you can only laugh, because if you don't, you'll scream. A young prisoner, new to the whole frostbite experience, panics. He screams, "My hands! They're turning black." The cell falls silent. The old man in the corner looks up and rasps, "Congrats! You've unlocked level 2. What's level 2? The kid gasps. Fingers falling off. Everyone bursts out laughing, and the young one just stares, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, like he's just enrolled in Surviving Winter 101. Sometimes you hold your hands near a candle, if one still exists. The sensation is strange. You can't feel the heat, but the skin burns anyway. The smell of scorched flesh fills the air. You glance down, smirk, and mutter, "At least now I smell better." Someone adds, "Yeah, like roasted corpse." The room erupts again in hoarse laughter, rusty bells ringing in the wind. Laughter doesn't save anyone here, but it reminds you that noise still exists, even when life is fading. As night deepens, the cold grows crueler. You curl up in a corner, watching your hands twitch. Each time blood stops flowing, your skin cracks and bleeds. Then the blood freezes, sealing the wound shut. Your fingers look like half-melted candles. You place your hand on your chest, feeling your heartbeat faint but steady. "Don't leave me," you whisper to yourself. "The fingers went off already. Just stay with me a little longer." A prisoner nearby, half-conscious, chuckles. "If we ever make it out alive, no one's going to want to shake hands again." You laugh back, your breath a ghostly mist. "That's fine," you say. Feels the same as shaking hands with a shovel anyway. Morning comes. You look around and see several fingers scattered across the stone floor, frozen stiff like little wooden sticks. One man gathers them up, lines them neatly and says, "There. A communal hand. We've got a new member now." The laughter that follows spreads through the cell like invisible fire. For a brief moment, the cold seems to step back. You look at your own hand, 2 fingers missing, but you still raise it toward the light, wave it slightly and say, "It's all right." Still enough to wave to freedom, if it ever shows up. The wind howls through the bars, carrying in the chill. You watch the pale mist rise from your mouth and smile. "See that?" You whisper to the man beside you. "At least I still have 10 imaginary fingers." And so, amid the dying winter, in a dungeon of cracked skin and falling flesh, soft laughter continues to echo, fragile but real. The laughter of those who refuse to give in, of hands without fingers still raised in defiance, joking with fate. "Not so easy, Winter, I've still got one last finger snap left in my imagination." It's the 10th morning, or maybe the 100th. No one knows anymore when you hear the iron hinges screech open. Creak, creak. The sound of metal groaning like it's tired of its own existence. The pale grey light of snow spills in, followed by the heavy footsteps of the jailer. He says nothing. He doesn't even look at anyone. He just opens the door, lifts a rusted bucket, and tips it over. Pieces of hard bread tumble onto the stone floor. Clattering clink, clink like coins dropping onto a coffin lid. Then he slams the door shut. No enjoy your meal, no eat before it gets cold. He works like a man feeding chickens, except chickens at least get to see the Sunday. Everyone lunges forward. Not just because of hunger, though, of course. Hunger has a say, but because habit does. In here, when food arrives, instinct beats manners every time. The biggest man moves first, snatches a piece, stuffs it in his mouth, and bites down, crack. A crumb flies out and hits your forehead. "Thanks," you say, picking it up, dusting it off, and chewing. Not that there's much to dust. Dirt, grit, dried blood, bits of straw, the natural seasoning of dungeon life. The bread is as hard as rock. You try to chew, but it feels like biting iron. Every crunch makes your teeth click, and you swear that in a few more days, the bread will win the fight. The old prisoner in the corner snorts. "Don't chew, just suck on it, let it soften." You obey. 10 minutes later, it hasn't changed at all. "It's waiting for me to chew first," you say. The old man replies, "Then the 2 of you will be waiting till spring." The cell chuckles softly, laughter mingling with the wind like the sound of candles burning. Every now and then, the jailer peers through the slit in the iron door. His eyes are flat and cold. To him, this is just routine morning bread, evening corpses. Once, he caught you mid-bite and smirked. Not a real smile, more like someone amused that humans could survive on food a dog wouldn't touch. You look right at him, swallow, and wave. "Thanks for breakfast, my lord," you say cheerfully. He frowns, slams the door and mutters, "Crazy bastard." You grin. "Maybe, but I'm a full-bellied crazy bastard." After he's gone, the others scavenge what crumbs remain. The quick ones grab 2, the slow ones get dust. A young prisoner picks a scrap off the floor. It's stained with dried blood and laughs. At least it has flavour. You raise an eyebrow. "Don't brag. That's your own blood." "Yeah," he says, "but I'm kind of getting used to it." The room bursts into rough laughter that tired. Wheezing kind that sounds half dead but still alive enough to mean something. Here, laughter is food sometimes more filling than bread. By noon, hunger returns, fiercer than before. You split your last half-piece with the man beside you. "Eat," you say. "I've still got yesterday's imaginary meal left." He bites down, grimaces. "I swear this is harder than the stones outside." You chew and reply, "At least stones don't taste like flour." He laughs, and soon you both do loud, reckless laughter. A voice from the corner calls out, "Careful, laughing burns calories." In these days, the only proof that you're still human is the ability to joke about your own misery. Once, the jailer threw a piece of bread, and it hit the old man square in the head. He yelped, "Ow!" then stopped, smirked, and said, "Well, at least he remembers I'm alive." You shot back. If he remembered any better, he'd throw the whole loaf. The old man nodded. Fine by me, I could use dessert. Those scraps of bread became the prison's calendar. Each time the door creaks and bread falls, it means another day survived. Another day that's all survival is now. Strangely enough, you grow used to the rhythm. You even start thinking, animals have it better, at least they get fed regularly. Then you laugh, wondering if somewhere out there, someone's eating hot soup right now and thinking of you, the man fighting over crumbs with his co-workers in this icebox called life. At night, with your stomach hollow and the wind howling through the bars, you stare at the tiny piece of bread left in your hand about the size of a finger. You don't eat it. You tuck it into your pocket like treasure. You turn to the man beside you and say, "This is my ticket to heaven," he asks. "Planning to eat it when you die?" You grin. "No. I'm going to sell it to God. I bet the bread's softer up there." Both of you laugh, then fall silent. The wind sighs through the cracks again. The bread sits in your palm, light as a broken promise. But you still smile, because even here, in a place where nothing's real, you still have the right to joke about your own suffering. And when you finally take a tiny, slow bite, you swear nothing in the world has ever tasted so flavorless, yet so good. If the dungeon had its own signature scent, it would surely be called Eau de Misery, a fragrance so potent it could wake your ancestors in the middle of the night. It's not just the smell of damp stone. Oh no. It's a miraculous blend of 3 weeks' worth of unwashed sweat, 2 months' worth of rotting straw, dried blood, contagious cough, and a hint of melting frost dripping from the ceiling. Every time you breathe in, your lungs sing, "Behold, the smell of life decomposing." At first, it's unbearable. But after a while, you grow addicted. The smell becomes a kind of homeland, a scent of belonging. If someone opened the door one day and a gust of clean air rushed in, you'd probably flinch. A young prisoner once said, "If I ever get out, I'll miss this smell." The old man next to him grunted, "Don't worry, it'll cling to your hair for life." The air in the dungeon is so thick you could slice it and serve it for dinner. One breath makes your throat itch and burn, but no one dares cough anymore, afraid it'll make the stench worse. You breathe lightly, like a cat tiptoeing past a bowl of water. Each exhale adds to the collective fog a humid cloud of human misery. Sometimes you think you can see the smell. It drifts lazily through the air, dense enough to feel with your fingertips. One morning, the prisoner beside you says, dead serious, "I think I've invented a new air freshener." One sniff, instant vomiting. You reply without missing a beat, "Sell it as Freedom Breath Dungeon Edition." The whole cell bursts into laughter for a few seconds, before the air and the smell reclaim their rule. The scent isn't just in the air, it's in everything. Straw, walls, clothes, hair. You remember your first days, still trying to stay clean, still sitting away from the ones who coughed too hard. Now, that distinction is meaningless. The smell is democratic. It spares no one. Even the strongest men now reek like gourmet human jerky, marinated in cold and despair. At night, when the temperature drops, the stench grows richer. The cold traps every particle of breath, dust, and disease, turning the air into a stew so thick it could be ladled. You sit there, barely able to see the man across from you through the murk, as if looking through boiling water. A prisoner far away mutters, "I can't smell anything anymore." You answer, "Congratulations. Your nose just saved your life." One day, the jailer opens the door and freezes at the threshold. He wrinkles his nose, covers his mouth, and curses. "What in hell is that?" The old man answers calmly, "The art of survival, sir." The guard's eyes widen, and he retreats faster than lightning. The door slams shut, lock clanking. Everyone bursts out laughing. Someone wheezes. "First time we've ever beaten him." With smell. And for a moment, the air tastes like victory. That smell, foul as it is, reminds you that you still have a body, that you still exist. You smell it, which means you're not dead. Sometimes you close your eyes, take a deep breath, and murmur, "Yeah, I'm still here. Still got the smell of life." Someone jokes back, "If the day ever comes when you can't smell it, don't worry, you've moved downstairs." At night, the air mixes with the wind, and it feels strange, like you're simmering inside a giant pot of soup, where the main ingredient is humanity. The wind stirs it all up, ladles it around, and drips icy broth onto your face. You sigh. At least I'm better preserved than salted fish. The others laugh, a tired, wheezy laughter that somehow warms the air more than any fire could. The truth is, after long enough down here, people stop fearing the smell. What terrifies them is when the smell fades, because that means no more breath, no more bodies, no more life. So they cling to it, as if it were the last trace of humanity left. You realize that in a world frozen solid, even the stink of decay can be proof of existence. And so, you laugh again at how absurd it all is, because somehow, even this foul smell makes you feel lucky. You lift your head, inhale deeply, mold, sickness, human musk, and whisper, "Beautiful, the scent of someone not yet swallowed by winter." Night falls, and for a brief moment, the dungeon is silent. Then, as if on some secret cue, the coughing choir begins its nightly performance. First, a small coo, soft and frail, like a kitten sneezing. Then another, and another. Before long, the whole cell joins in, echoing like the saddest chamber concert in all of medieval Europe. Cough, 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 bounces off the stone walls. If anyone ever recorded it, they'd swear it was an audition for the choir of the dying. You lie there, staring up at the dim stone ceiling, listening to the symphony of suffering float above you. Each prisoner has his own tone. The old man's cough is dry and steady, like the crackle of dying embers. The young one's is rapid and sharp, like a war drum. Someone else wheezes wetly, like a leaky forge bellows. And you, trying so hard not to join, finally surrender. Your cough bursts out, raw and rasping, ending with a perfect little KHK. You whisper, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to offer my tenor for tonight's performance." The man next to you chuckles hoarsely. "You should be the conductor, your cough has rhythm." You raise an eyebrow. "And you?" "Percussion," he says. Then coughs 3 sharp beats, perfectly timed. Both of you laugh. The laughter is soon drowned out by another wave of coughing, as if the dungeon itself is reminding you. This isn't a theatre. This is a hospital with no beds and no medicine. As the night deepens, the coughing grows heavier. Some cough until they collapse, gasping for air. Others try to hold it in, afraid to wake the rest. But the more they fight, the harder it bursts out, like gunfire in the dark. And when one cough suddenly stops for good, everyone pauses for a few silent seconds. The quietest moment of the night before another voice takes its place. You try to sleep, but can't. The coughing comes in waves, rolling across the room. You turn over, bury your head in straw, cover your ears, it doesn't help. The sound still seeps through, mixing with the dripping water, drip, 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 to form a strange kind of music. Sad, haunting, but so familiar that silence itself would now feel unsettling. Your own cough worsens, your throat burns, your chest feels like it's boiling. Each time you cough, something inside bubbles and surges, ready to spill. When you finally spit onto the stone floor, a dark red streak blooms out, disturbingly beautiful. You stare at it and murmur, "At least I've created some art." The man beside you glances over. "Beautiful, just missing lighting." "You got a torch?" "No, but I can blow smoke." Both of you laugh, then break into another fit of coughing, a duet rehearsing for its final concert. Sometimes, from the farthest corner, a lonely cough echoes long, hollow, and sad, bouncing back like a ghostly reply. Everyone hears it, but no one speaks. Only the wind answers, whistling through the bars, mocking, "Keep coughing, let's see who wins." Some say the wind carries the souls of those who died here, coming back to count the ones next in line. You chuckle. "Guess I'm already in the top 10. When the coughing grows unbearable, you start talking to yourself. "Hey, lungs, are you trying to leave me?" "Nah, just stepping out for some fresh air. Bring some back, will you?" The prisoner nearby laughs through a wheeze. "If your lungs really escape, tell them to write." You reply, "Sure, I'll send it by windmail express delivery." Faint laughter spreads, mingling with the coughs. In a place where every breath is a battle, a joke is a luxury, but it's also proof that you're still fighting. Someone jokes, "If any of us survive this winter, we should start a band." What'll we call it? The Coughing Choir Medieval Edition. Another prisoner coughs a few beats like a drum roll. The room erupts in laughter, then joins in, coughing in rhythm. For a few absurd, glorious minutes, the dungeon isn't a prison, it's a stage for the doomed, where laughter still outshines despair. When dawn creeps near, the coughing fades not because the sickness has eased, but because no one has strength left. You sit against the wall, watching pale mist drift from your lips, rising, swirling, and vanishing into the fog. They say a cough is a cry for help. You think, we've sent hundreds of prayers into the air tonight. You look up at the stone ceiling. No answer, just a droplet falling onto your forehead, cold as the truth. No one's listening, but keep coughing, it's the only proof you're still alive. You exhale softly, smile faintly, and add 2 quiet coughs, punctuation marks, at the end of a very long night. The next morning, if you could even call it that, since outside was still the same thick, grey soup of snow and ice, the dungeon woke in silence. No one spoke, no one laughed. Not even a cough broke the air. It was strange. After so many nights filled with the echo of cook, 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 the stillness felt wrong, as if even the wind was holding its breath. You sat up, the straw crackling under your back. The cold sank straight into your flesh. You looked around. Everyone was still there, curled up in the mouldy straw, like statues carved from bone and frost. In the corner, a young prisoner sat exactly as he had the night before, knees to his chest, face buried in his arms. You watched him for a few seconds, then said softly, "Hey, wake up. Breakfast, hard bread again." No reaction. You flicked a piece of straw at him. Nothing. "Well," you said with a shaky laugh, "looks like you've won the hibernation contest." The old man nearby cracked one eye open, glanced over, and immediately understood. He sighed. "Another one." You fell silent and lowered your head. A faint white cloud drifted from your mouth and vanished in the air. Others were watching too. No one said goodbye. In this place, death arrived as quietly as breath disappeared. The young man had frozen to death, but his face looked strangely peaceful. No grimace, no terror, just a faint smile, as if he'd fallen asleep dreaming of a warm bowl of soup. You murmured, "At least he went in a dream, not in a cough." The old man replied softly, "Yeah, and not from hunger. Freezing's a luxury here." Someone let out a brittle laugh. The kind of laugh that, if it had a sound effect, would be cracking ice. A while later, the jailer came in. He took one look, snorted, said nothing. He motioned to 2 others to drag the body away. Their hands trembled as they gripped the frozen arms. The sound that followed was awful, like breaking dry sticks. You winced and turned away, but the noises kept coming. The scraping of the body across the stone, a dull thud against the wall. When the iron door shut again, the cold rushed back in. The guard was gone, but the smell of death lingered bitter, heavy, clinging to the damp air. You looked at the spot where the boy had lain. The straw was still pressed down. The prisoner beside you clicked his tongue. "See? At least he left us a free spot. I might move there later, looks drier." You looked up at him, and both of you laughed. Not the happy kind, just the laugh of people too tired to cry. Here, life and death were separated by a single breath, or a gust of wind that lingered a moment too long. Death became routine. Each morning, everyone glanced around to count who was still breathing. 1, 2, 3, missing one, and someone would sigh, "Another one changed rooms." The old man joked, "No need to bury anyone, snow will do it for free. Saves labour." You smiled, but something inside twisted, not fear exactly, more like envy. In some strange way, death here seemed gentler than living. That noon, you saw a rat scurry across the stone floor. It paused, sniffed the dead man's spot, then darted away. You watched it go and muttered, "Even the rats know how to find the warmest place." Another prisoner chuckled, "Yeah, smarter than us." You looked at each other and laughed, like you were chatting about the weather instead of corpses. That night, the wind screamed harder, cold enough to pierce bone. You curled up in the straw, watching your faint breath drift upward. You wondered if the dead still felt the cold. If not, maybe that was the only mercy left. The old man rasped nearby, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of surviving another night like this. You nodded. Then tell me when you go, and I'll take your spot. Might still be warm. He chuckled, coughed a little, then whispered, Fair deal. By morning, he was still alive. But the man next to him wasn't. Everyone looked, stayed quiet, and went on with their day, or rather, went on waiting for the next night. You realized that in this place, death wasn't an event anymore. It was a schedule. No one screamed, no one prayed. Only pale breaths drifted up, slower each time, dissolving into the thick, dead air. You closed your eyes, trying to sleep, but couldn't. In your mind, you still heard the dragging of bodies from the night before, blending with the wind whistling through the bars. You smiled faintly, not sure why, and the last thing you whispered before the dark took you was, If I die tomorrow, I just hope someone remembers to cover me with a little extra straw. I'm more afraid of the cold than of death. The scrape of metal against stone rings out that harsh, familiar sound that always means the same thing. The morning cleanup. No one needs to say a word. The dungeon falls silent at once. Everyone holds their breath, listening to the slow, dragging rhythm. Shh, shh, shkrush, shh, shh, shkrush. The sound of a frozen body sliding across the floor, chains clinking faintly. It's a funeral march no one invited, yet it comes as regularly as breakfast. You turn your face away, though your eyes still follow. 2 gaunt prisoners have been ordered to haul the corpse. They say nothing, just lower their heads and grab the dead man's stiff arms, pulling him as if he were a sack of straw. His skin has turned grey-blue, hard as wood, his lips dark purple. As he slides past, bits of straw cling to him and fall one by one, soft as snowflakes. You take a breath, a mistake. The cold, mouldy stench of death hits you hard. You almost cough, but swallow it back. In this place, even coughing feels like a form of disrespect. The iron door opens, and the wind rushes in, wild, hungry, alive. It slashes through the room, across faces and bare skin, straight into lungs. Everyone curls inward. The jailer gestures. The men drag the corpse out. The door slams shut, clang. Then screech. Silence. That silence is heavier than the sound of death. You look to where the body lay, only a shallow dent in the straw, the faint outline of a man. Such a small space, yet somehow it feels as though the whole room has lost its last bit of warmth. No one speaks, but everyone feels it. That spot is colder now, colder than anywhere else. So cold, no one dares sit near it, not even on the damp straw. A young prisoner glances at it and murmurs, "If I die, don't drag me off right away. Let me rest a bit. I like it quiet." The old man in the corner rasps back, "Fine, but don't lie near me. I talk in my sleep. You won't get any rest." The dungeon ripples with faint laughter, brief, brittle, like the last spark in dying coals. But even laughter can't chase away the chill that crept in when the corpse was taken out. You keep staring at the empty space. There's nothing there, no blood, no mark, yet something invisible lingers. It's as if the dead man's soul still huddles in that corner, watching with hollow eyes. Every time the wind passes through, the straw there stirs, and everyone looks away, pretending not to see. "Do you feel it's colder there?" You whisper. The prisoner beside you lifts his head, nods. "Yeah." It's like the cold decided to stay. You let out a dry laugh. Smart, cold, knows how to pick a room. Later, someone gathers up the old straw and replaces it with fresh, but no one lies there. Everyone says, "Leave it, let him keep it." No one here really believes in ghosts. Yet in the darkness, with death so close, people somehow learn to respect the empty space. That hollow spot becomes its own kind of presence, invisible but undeniable. That night, you curl up, listening to the wind whistle through the bars. Each time it sweeps over that spot, a chill runs through your chest, as if the cold itself is crawling inside you. You mumble, "Back again, huh? Thought you'd left." Then you smile faintly. "If you did come back, bring a blanket next time, it's freezing here." Someone nearby hears you and chuckles. Careful what you wish for, he might come share your straw. You grin. "Fine by me, long as he doesn't snore." The two of you laugh quietly, hoarse, small, but somehow it warms the air a little. Maybe because it's the only living sound left in the dungeon, fragile laughter fighting off the shadow of death. By morning, a dull grey light seeps in. The empty spot remains untouched, smooth, as though no one had ever lain there. You glance at it and sigh. Someone whispers, "He's gone, but I swear the cold feels sharper today." You smirk, half joking, half serious, probably testing how much more we can take. You look around. Everyone's still curled up, still coughing, still breathing out pale clouds. Each breath rises, drifts, fades, just like the man who left yesterday. And you realize, no one ever truly disappears here. They just dissolve like breath in the cold lingering on, making the frostbite deeper, the silence heavier. You pull your torn cloth tighter around your neck, close your eyes, and whisper, "Sleep well, friend. If you're cold, borrow some of my warmth." The wind sighs through the bars again. The straw rustles gently. You chuckle under your breath, and before sleep takes you, one last thought crosses your mind. Guess that was his way of saying thanks. After that night, everyone still breathing came to the same conclusion. Death in this dungeon wasn't the scary part. Waiting for it to knock was. Dying meant no more cold, no more coughing, no more hunger. But waiting to die, that was a spiritual sport for saints. You woke up, looked around. 12 people. Yesterday, there were 13. No one asked, "Who died?" any more. They only asked, "Whose turn is it today?" Morning came, and everyone sat still, as if meditating. Some closed their eyes, some stared at the wall, some quietly counted each breath just to prove they still existed. You leaned against the wall, watching your fellow inmates like snow statues that somehow breathed. You thought, if I ever get out of here, I'm opening a class called The Art of Waiting to Die with a Smile. It'll be packed. Fear had left the room long ago. Some even started betting. The old prisoner squinted and said, "My money's on Pierre tonight." Pierre, the youngest of the lot, hair like a bird's nest, shot up and snapped. "That's a terrible bet." The old man shrugged. "Fine, but if you go, I'm taking your spot." The straw there looked softer. The dungeon erupted in laughter. Pierre raised a weak fist. "If I die, I'll haunt you. Go ahead, just don't snore." By noon, everyone was busy, waiting, doing nothing. You could almost hear time dripping onto the stone floor. You started counting the drops from the ceiling, made it to 408 before losing focus, because the 409th landed on your head. "Guess that's a sign I'm not next," you muttered, then laughed to yourself. Someone said, "Waiting for death here is like standing in line for bread, except you never know when it's your turn." The old man chuckled. "And when it is your turn, there's no bread, just the bill." The room burst into laughter, then fell quiet again when someone started coughing. Everyone turned toward the sound. The man finished coughing, wiped his mouth, saw blood, and said calmly, "Don't worry, just submitting an early application." By late afternoon, the dim grey light slipped through the bars, the colour of a dying breath. You looked around and realised how eerily calm everyone was. No one prayed anymore, no one begged. Maybe even God was tired of this dungeon. Now, they just told stories, old ones, true ones, made-up ones. One man claimed he was once a soldier who survived a battle by pretending to be dead. The others laughed. "Try that again now." "No need," he replied. "Just stay still a few more days." Night fell. Everyone curled into their straw. The wind blew through the bars, long and mournful, like the flute of death himself rehearsing a tune. You smiled to yourself. If he's coming, he could at least knock first. The man beside you, half asleep, mumbled, "He doesn't need to." The door's already open. You both chuckled softly, laughter fading into white breath that drifted away like smoke. The worst part wasn't watching others die, it was waking up and realizing you hadn't. Another day? You thought, half annoyed, half amused. You rubbed your hands and said to the old man, "You know, I think death's lost my file. Probably forgot my name." The old man snorted. "Or maybe he's afraid you'll outlive him." The whole dungeon laughed. Weak, raspy, but warm. Someone said, "If we last long enough, maybe they'll free us in spring." "Nah," another replied. "By spring, even death will take a vacation." Then sign me up for a transfer. I'm bored of waiting." In that faint laughter, you realize something ridiculous but true. No one here feared dying anymore. What they feared was still living. The waiting was worse, longer than the cold, duller than the bread, emptier than hunger itself. You leaned back, eyes half closed, exhaling a thin white mist. "Well," you thought, "if my turn hasn't come yet, I'll just keep living. At least I'll have a story ready to make death laugh when he shows up late." And you laughed quietly to yourself in the frozen dark. Just a small sound, but it echoed softly, blending with the mist, and for a moment it felt like the whole dungeon grew 1 degree warmer, if only in imagination. In a place where the light never changed and church bells could not reach, the idea of day and night slowly melted away like ice fading into breath. No one remembered what day it was, or which month, or how long it had been since they first stepped into the dungeon. Only the sound of dripping water drip, drip, drip. Steady, slow, relentless, like the heartbeat of the prison itself, reminded them that time was still moving, though no one truly wished it would. Each drop fell from the mossy stone ceiling, hit the frozen floor, shattered, and vanished, leaving behind a tiny dark spot, like a musical note. At first, they hated that sound. It was a cruel reminder that each second was another piece of life being scraped away. But gradually, they learned to live with it, even rely on it. It became the only clock still ticking. The old prisoner in the corner declared himself the keeper of time. Every morning, he would announce solemnly, "Drop number 10,357, congratulations. We're still alive." The whole cell would chuckle weakly. Tired laughter, yes, but enough to chase away the cold for a brief moment. You learned to count 2, not to track time, but to keep your mind from unraveling. You whispered in your head, 1, 2, 3, 10, 50, 100. You kept going until you lost track. The drops fell so evenly that you couldn't tell if you were hearing them or just imagining them. Sometimes you wondered, were they real, or was it your sanity dripping away, 1 drop at a time? One bored young prisoner began naming each drop. "First drop of the morning, Pierre. Second, Marie. Third, stop falling." The cell burst into laughter. Someone added, "If we live long enough, we'll have an entire family tree of water drops." From then on, everyone adopted their own personal drip. Whoever heard one closest to their spot would claim it as a foster child. You named yours Lucien. It sounded warm somehow, or at least less likely to shiver in the wind. Time in the dungeon moved with the rhythm of drip, drip, drip. When someone died, the water kept falling, perfectly indifferent. One day, you looked into a tiny puddle forming in the middle of the room. It reflected your face, pale, hollow, eyes sunken deep. You stared for a moment, then laughed. So time doesn't just pass, it laughs right back at you. Sometimes they made games out of it. The old man started a drop counting contest. Anyone who lost count had to tell a joke. The problem was, no one actually knew what the right count was. The contest lasted exactly 3 drops. One man shouted, "The third one fell faster than the second." The old man argued, "No, the second just fell crooked." The room exploded with laughter. For a few fleeting seconds, the dungeon echoed with something rarer than sunlight joy. But when night fell, the sound returned to its original form, somber, patient, eternal. Drip, drip, like winter's invisible hand gently tapping on their coffins. Each sound a reminder. Another day gone, another body weaker, another breath fading. You closed your eyes, listening closely, realizing you were counting not the drops anymore, but your own breaths. And then, the strangest thing happened. The dripping stopped. One morning, the cell was completely silent. No drips, no rustling, only the moan of wind outside. Everyone looked at one another, confused, uneasy. "Did the water die?" Pierre whispered. The old man shook his head. "Nah, maybe it's on a morning break." Someone muttered. "Good. At least now we can rest our ears." But moments later, drip. A single clear drop fell, echoing like a church bell. Everyone exhaled at once, laughing in relief. At least something in here still works harder than we do, someone said. From that day on, the sound was no longer dreadful. It became a friend, the heartbeat of the dungeon. When someone was dying, another would lift his head and whisper, "Hear that? The water's still falling. Time's still here. We're not done yet." And so, in that heavy silence, drip, drip, drip. Each drop continued to fall, steady, patient, eternal. It gave them one small, fragile reason to believe that even in the heart of winter's prison, time still moved, and they had not yet completely disappeared from the world. By now, everyone in the dungeon had grown used to the cold, the hunger, even the death. But no one had prepared for the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a graveyard, of a room where only breath and the faint clink of chains still moved. And when a mind is trapped too long inside 4 stone walls, it begins to do the strangest thing to keep itself from breaking. It starts talking to itself. At first, it was just murmurs. So cold. Yeah, freezing. Hungry. Always. Then the murmurs became conversations, as if each prisoner had found an invisible friend sitting beside them. The first was Etienne, a young man with sunken cheeks and a quiet smile. One morning, he sat up straight, smiled at nothing, and said, "Good morning, Mother. I'll chop some firewood today." Everyone stared. No one laughed. No one stopped him. Because deep down, they all wished they could say the same thing. Etienne went on all day, gently stroking the straw beside him as if petting an imaginary dog. "Good boy, don't run into the snow again. It's cold out there." He smiled, eyes glowing faintly. Someone teased, "Hey, Etienne, who are you talking to?" He turned, deadly serious. "My family. They're here. You just can't see them." The words sent a chill down everyone's spine, not from fear, but envy. At least he had someone to talk to. And so, talking to nothing became a group activity. The old man in the corner told war stories to his long-dead wife. The bearded one preached sermons to his imaginary children. And you weren't an exception either. One night, as the wind screamed through the bars, you caught yourself whispering, "I'm home. Is the house still there?" In your mind, a fire appeared, bright, red, crackling, with a pot of soup steaming gently. You smiled, held out your hands to warm them, and almost laughed when your fingers met nothing but cold stone. The conversations grew livelier. The dungeon sometimes sounded like a busy market. One man scolded his imaginary child for skipping school. Another argued with his imaginary wife for cooking too salty. One even flirted with his invisible lover. "When I get out of here, I'll make you a ring forged from rusty nails, one of a kind." A voice from the dark added, "If I die, she can have me instead." The whole cell burst into hoarse laughter. Thin, shaky, but warm, like a few sparks in the ashes. At night, Etienne kept chatting with his mother. "You know, Mama," he said softly, "I got a big piece of bread today, harder than a rock, but I saved half for tomorrow." He paused, listening, then nodded. "Yes, I know. You always told me to eat slowly." You watched him, half amused, half heartbroken. If his mother really could hear him, you thought, she'd probably be more worried her son's talking to a wall. Sometimes, though, the talks turned darker. Someone would start arguing with their imaginary companion, shouting, crying. One man banged his head against the wall, screaming, "I said I was sorry! Why won't you forgive me?" Another prisoner gently pulled him back, whispering, "She forgave you, my friend. Go to sleep. She's in your dream now." The man smiled and actually fell asleep. As for you, you chose to talk to a fire. Not a person, just a fire. Each night, you imagined the flames dancing, whispering to you about the world outside. "It's snowing less now," said the fire, in your own voice. "Children are throwing snowballs. There's an old man selling roasted bread." You nodded, replying softly, "Yeah, I can smell it." Then you closed your eyes and let that imagined warmth chase the real cold away. The frightening part was how real it all became. Sometimes you heard laughter and turned, but no one was there. Sometimes you heard footsteps in the snow, crackling wood in a hearth, and you wondered, am I just imagining too well, or am I actually losing my mind? Then you smiled to yourself. If I'm mad, At least I've got someone to talk to. Once, the jailer opened the door and froze. The prisoners were all murmuring to the air, smiling, nodding, laughing quietly to unseen friends. He stood there for a few seconds, pale, then quickly slammed the door. After that, he only cracked it open to toss in the bread, never daring to look inside again. The old man chuckled. "Ha! Finally we've scared him." You grinned. "Yeah, he's probably counting more people than he can see." That night the dungeon breathed softly with wind, dripping water, and the whispers of those still alive, talking to ghosts, to memories, to themselves, just to prove they still had a voice. And in that frozen winter darkness, maybe talking to shadows was the only way left, to feel alive. At some point, even those who had grown used to the darkness began to crave a glimpse of light, even if it was light born only from their own imagination. And so, in that thick world of dampness, blood, and weary breath, a young prisoner named Henri decided to open a window for the dungeon. With no paper, no pen, he used a lump of charcoal left over from an oil lamp that had gone out the previous winter. First, he drew a hand on the wall, 5 fingers spread wide, crude and crooked, but full of life. "This," he said, his voice both proud and trembling, "is my hand, back when it could still feel." The whole cell chuckled softly. Someone teased, "What, you planning to draw the other hand to keep warm?" Henri nodded, dead serious. "No, I'm saving that one to draw the future." After the hand, he drew a sun, a lopsided circle with rays like broken sticks. "This is my fire," he said. "It won't go out." Everyone fell silent, staring at that crooked shape and feeling oddly warm. The old man in the back muttered, "I've forgotten what the sun even looks like." Henri smiled gently. "That's all right. I don't remember its face either, but I remember how it felt on mine." Day by day, Henri's wall turned into the dungeon's one and only exhibition. Whenever the jailer opened the door, the faint light that crept in reflected off the grey lines, making the hand and sun shimmer as if they were truly moving. Someone joked, "Careful, one day you'll draw a real window, and I'll escape through it." Henri heard that and actually did it. Using his soot-covered fingers, he drew a window with thin bars, beyond it a meadow, a small house, and a few birds in the distance. Of course, it was all imagination. But when he finished, the dungeon went dead quiet. Everyone stared at the drawing as if it truly opened a path to freedom. "Look," Henri said. "There's sunlight out there." Someone whispered. "I see it. There are birds flying." "Yeah, and I can smell the hay." "No, that's the mouldy straw." Someone cut in, and the whole room burst out laughing. The laughter rang out so clearly that even the wind outside seemed to pause for a moment. For that instant, everyone felt a little less like prisoners. After that, everyone started asking Henri to draw something for them. One said, "Draw me a loaf of bread." "No, draw my dog. And me, I want a big, soft bed." Henri laughed and kept sketching clumsy shapes, ugly, crooked, but somehow full of life. The stone walls were meters thick, but they couldn't compete with a dull piece of charcoal and one starving man's imagination. At night, when the wind howled through the cracks, everyone would gather around that wall, staring at the window Henri had drawn. He leaned back against it and murmured, half dreaming, "If I die tomorrow, don't erase it." The old prisoner asked, "Why not?" Henri smiled faintly. "Because if I go, I still want a window to look out from." The whole room laughed. Someone added, "All right, we'll hang a sign there, Henri's room sunny view." Everyone laughed until they coughed, but in their eyes there was something more, not quite joy but hope, fragile and rare enough to be handled like glass, lest it shatter in the cold. From that day on, the wall became everyone's refuge. When they were exhausted, they leaned against the sun to warm themselves. When despair crept in, they looked at the window and whispered, "There's still a sky out there." They all knew that even if the real sun ever did rise, they might not live long enough to see it, but it didn't matter. Believing it still existed was enough. One morning, the jailer noticed the drawings and frowned. He lifted his broom, ready to scrub them off, but stopped. Maybe even he, in this season of death, couldn't bring himself to destroy the only light left to those turning to stone. He just grunted and shut the door. As the lock clanked, Henri said softly, with a hint of pride, "See, art makes even the devil hesitate." And from that night on, in that frozen dungeon, they slept beneath a hand-drawn sun, dreaming of a sky without frost, a place without walls, without chains, where a window stood open and warm wind blew through. When every story had run dry and even laughter faded, leaving only wind and weary groans, people began turning to God. Not out of some great faith, but because in a stone dungeon, when there's no one left to talk to, God becomes the only one who hasn't left yet. At first, the prayers were timid, as if everyone was embarrassed to ask for something they'd once mocked. One man whispered, "Lord, if you're still listening, please grant me a piece of softer bread." Another added quietly, "And a thicker blanket." Someone scoffed, "Careful. If he actually hands them out, make sure he divides them evenly, or I'll file a complaint." Laughter broke out, dry but warm. Then, when night fell and everyone lay still, their breath faint in the cold air, the prayers began to drift out soft as smoke. No one spoke loudly, afraid to disturb others, or maybe afraid to hear the sound of their own despair. "Please let me survive the night. Please don't let my mother dream of me in a grave. Please don't let the cold reach my heart." Each voice was different, each prayer its own, each person holding a private version of God in their mind. You were no exception. At first, you didn't believe. If you really exist, you thought, then where are you when we cough ourselves to death? But after the 100th endless night, you whispered softly to no one, "If you can hear me, don't save me. Just let me dream of sunlight once more." And strangely, in your dream you did. It was so warm you actually laughed in your sleep. Some prayed not for themselves, but for the dead. "Lord, don't let him freeze beneath the snow. Please give his soul a real fire, not the one we only imagine." Simple words, but somehow full of warmth. Among shivering souls, those prayers were like candles passed from hand to hand, weak, but still shining. One evening, the old prisoner decided to hold a church service. He cleared his throat, coughed a few times, then said, "Dear believers, today's sermon, How to Pray When God is Also Hibernating." The whole cell erupted in laughter. Then he clasped his hands, voice steady. "We pray not so he'll hear us, but so we still have a voice." Someone muttered, "And if we lose that voice?" "Then pray with your breath," he said. "God understands everything, even your shiver." From then on, prayer became part of dungeon life. No church needed, no priest required, just breath still hanging on the lips. Whenever someone was dying, another would lean close and whisper, "Go on, I'll pray for you." It sounded both tragic and oddly funny. No one knew if the message would ever get delivered. But everyone believed that even a little faith could warm a soul. Some nights, the wind howled so hard it sounded like someone crying. Etienne said, "Hear that? Maybe God's playing the flute." Henri chuckled softly. "No, he's just checking the chimney." The cell laughed, then fell silent. After that, each man prayed in his own way, one clasping hands, one staring at the ceiling, one saying nothing at all, only breathing. Slowly, prayer stopped being a sign of fear and became a habit like counting water drops or waiting for light through the cracks. No one knew if anyone was listening, but one thing they all believed: as long as they could still pray, they could still hope. And on that longest night of winter, when everything was silent, you heard your own voice whisper through the dark, "Dear God, if I don't make it through tonight, please warm my dreams just a little." Outside, the wind paused for a heartbeat, just long enough for you to believe that maybe someone really did listen. That night, the dungeon was so cold that breath froze mid-air, and every sound seemed to dissolve into mist. No one had the strength to speak aloud, yet somewhere in the dark, whispers began small, trembling, strangely sad. They were no longer prayers, but fragments of requiems, scattered and raw, woven together by those who were about to disappear from the world. At first it was one voice, then two, then three. They didn't know what the others were saying, but the whispers blended together, swirling with the wind, slipping through the iron bars, as if their souls were singing a mournful song for themselves. The wind outside howled through the cracks, slipping in like an echo, long, choked, and low. It wasn't just wind anymore. It was memory. The voices of those who had once lived in this cell, hundreds of winters ago. Etienne whispered, weakly, "Do you hear that? They're singing." You looked up, listening. And yes, beneath the howling wind, there was something else. A faint harmony, a sigh that sounded human. You murmured, "Maybe it's the souls of those who've gone. They're singing for us." Henri smiled sadly. "Then at least we won't die alone." The whole dungeon fell into a strange silence. No one slept. Everyone listened to the wind scraping against the stone, as if every gust carried the voices of the dead. "I once sat here. I was cold like you. Then I faded. You will fade. But don't be afraid." Even the old prisoner, the one who always made jokes, gave a soft laugh and said, "If they're singing for us, I hope they know more than one tune. This one's putting me to sleep." The cell burst into dry laughter. The sound mingled with the wind, giving the requiem a rhythm. Someone whispered, "Maybe they're laughing with us, or scolding us for singing off-key." And so, that night, the dungeon turned into a strange chapel. No priest, no hymns, only wind and breath entwined. Each time the wind howled, it felt like someone passing by, leaning close to whisper, "Don't forget us." Henri, leaning against the wall, looked up at the stone ceiling and said, "I don't think souls disappear. They just change shape like the wind. Today I breathe. Tomorrow I'll fly through the cracks." You nodded softly. "Then when I die, come back and whisper in my ear, tell me if the sun's shining out there." Henri chuckled. "Don't worry. I'll howl loud enough for you to hear." The cold seemed to lift for a moment. Maybe because everyone felt it, that something, somewhere in the darkness, was still moving, still alive. The whispers and the wind merged together, painting an invisible picture of drifting souls. Some closed their eyes and imagined thousands of pale figures hovering near the ceiling, thin as mist, hand in hand, singing without words. By morning, no one spoke of it. They just looked at each other, eyes red, but bright in a way that didn't belong to despair. Etienne said softly, "I dreamed of the ones who left. They said we sang with them last night." The old man chuckled. "We sang that badly and still got fans?" Etienne smiled. "Better that than dying in silence." After that, every night when the wind began to whistle through the cracks, everyone lay still, not from fear, but to listen. To the invisible requiem repeating itself, gentle as a lullaby. It carried pain, memory, and an odd kind of warmth, as if the forgotten dead still lingered here, keeping the living from feeling completely alone. And when the wind finally quieted, you sighed and whispered, "Thank you for staying and singing for those of us who haven't left yet." A drop of water fell from the ceiling tack, perfectly timed, like a bell marking the end of the night's requiem. After so many nights with only wind and breath for company, hunger began to take the place of honor in the dungeon. It wasn't just in your stomach, it crawled into your mind, slithered into your dreams, and maybe even sat beside you, smirking. "Hello, I've come again today." You forced a grin. "Stay as long as you like. I'm used to you." Hunger in a medieval dungeon wasn't like hunger in the world outside. Out there, people looked for food. In here, they searched for memories. And in those memories, the food was better than anything that had ever truly existed. Etienne, clutching his stomach, spoke dreamily. "I remember my mother's bread, warm and crisp, smelling of melted butter." Henri cut in. "You're mistaken. That's my bread. Your mother's probably couldn't rise in this cold." The whole cell burst into laughter. When the laughter faded, everyone swallowed hard, the sound of an empty gulp echoing off the stone. An old prisoner preferred to talk about food like a philosopher. Eyes closed, solemn as a scholar, he said, "You know, a proper roast must have its edges slightly charred when you bite in. It should crack softly, and the smell should fill the whole room." The dungeon fell silent, listening as if to a sacred lecture. Then Etienne whispered, "And the bread on the side?" The old man sighed. "Unfortunately, I was cooking with imagination, so it burned." "You started dreaming too?" In your sleep, you sat at a long feast table, covered with roasted meat, fresh bread, and steaming soup. You laughed in joy, raised your knife to cut, then woke up. In front of you was only a piece of dry bread from yesterday, hard as stone. You looked at it and sighed. The real world is cruel, even dreams cut the meal short. Hunger turned everyone's imagination into art. One man began to cook with words. He described every step. First, I take onions, chop them fine, fry them until golden. Smells amazing. Then what? Henri asked, eyes wide. Then I pour in water, add salt, drop in beef to simmer 6 hours. You have beef? No. I imagine the beef instead. Everyone nodded. That's efficient. Saves fuel. One evening, Etienne suddenly declared, I'm opening a restaurant. Everyone stared. He continued seriously. It's called L'air et la foi, air and faith. The menu has only one dish. The aroma of memory. Guests leave full in imagination and starving in reality. The old man nodded. Brilliant business model. I'll invest half a rock as capital. From that day, the dungeon restaurant opened every night. Henri was the chef, Etienne the waiter, and you were assigned to make the smell of roasting meat by rubbing 2 stones together. The scraping sound echoed, and everyone inhaled deeply with eyes closed. Someone said, Delicious, the beef stew's a bit tough tonight. That's the stones, not the beef. You replied. Doesn't matter, he said. Tough means it's cooked. Strangely, those imaginary feasts helped people stay alive longer. Every time they ate in their minds, it gave them some kind of energy. Maybe not for the body, but for the soul. Someone said, Hunger kills the flesh, but imagination saves the spirit. The old man chuckled. That's why I say, don't let your stomach starve more than your head. Still, there were accidents. One night, Etienne was sniffing his imaginary toasted bread and slammed his head against the wall. Ow! It's hot! He cried. The room erupted in laughter. You teased. Well, guess the bread's done then? He rubbed his forehead and winced. Yeah, the bread's baked and so is my skull. That night, as everyone lay down with their stomachs growling, you heard Etienne mumble, Tomorrow I'll cook snow soup, served with wind, and for balance. You chuckled in the dark. Nice. Save me a table by the fireplace. There's only wind here, he said. So to feel warm, you'll have to sit near my mouth, I talk a lot. Laughter filled the cell again, rough, hoarse, but warm. In a place where hunger could drive men insane, they found a way not to die of despair, turning hunger into humour, meals into dreams. And though no one ever truly ate, somehow, for a few fleeting minutes, they felt full until their stomachs began to growl once more. The next morning, after a night of imaginary feasting in their dreams, everyone woke up dazed and with their mouths soaked. Etienne sat up suddenly, wiped his mouth, grimaced, and said, I swear I just ate a real loaf of bread. If you ate, and your stomach's still growling, you must have swallowed air, Henri replied, rubbing his flat belly. You lay beside them, laughing weakly. At least you dreamed of eating. I dreamed I was chasing the bread. It kept running around the table. I never caught it. Hunger, when awake, was crueler than in dreams. The moment you opened your eyes, the smell of damp stone hit you, cold to the bone, and the only thing resembling food was yesterday's dry crust, something so hard a bird would turn mid-flight rather than eat it. Henri picked up a piece, turning it in his hand like he was deciding whether to eat it or carve it into a weapon. Then he sighed. Too hard. I could use it as a nail. Etienne said, Keep it. Maybe tomorrow they'll give us hot water, we'll soak it into porridge. The old man in the corner chuckled. Keep dreaming, son. You looked around, everyone was chewing on nothing. Some sat still with their eyes closed, continuing their meals in their minds. One young prisoner sucked his fingers, eyes shining. The butter's melting in my mouth. Oh, heaven. Henri smacked his shoulder. Wake up, you're licking dust. The room burst into raspy laughter, weak but alive. In hunger, laughter was the only food still allowed. Hunger made the body weak, but the imagination brilliant. Etienne said seriously. "I've got an idea. I'll write a cookbook for prisoners." "What's it called?" you asked. 100 dishes of air and faith." Henri laughed. "First course soup of size, served with recycled straw bread. And dessert? A good dream, if you can still sleep." Everyone roared with laughter, but it didn't last long. Soon, stomachs growled again in unison the dungeon's familiar rot-rot symphony. You joked, "If death has any taste in music, he'd be clapping for our orchestra." Henri sighed. "At least we'll die to a fine melody." By noon, hunger reached its peak. No one joked anymore. Everyone lay flat, eyes dim, heads spinning. You felt your stomach stick to your spine. Each time you swallowed, your throat clicked like rocks grinding together. Etienne whispered weakly. "I dreamed someone threw down a loaf of bread. I reached for it, and it floated away." You smiled faintly. "Maybe God's having breakfast up there." In the afternoon, a guard appeared, opened the hatch, and tossed in a few crumbs. Everyone moved toward them like starving cats, but there was no fight this time. Too tired, they simply bent down and picked up the tiniest pieces, sharing what they could. You found one crumb the size of your pinky. You bit it, your teeth cracked. Etienne looked over. "If you can swallow that, I'll knight you, sir, of the dry bread." You croaked back. "And if you laugh again, I'll crown you saint of starvation." Night fell, and hunger made everyone restless. Every growl from a stomach sounded like a demon calling. Henri sighed. "I swear, if I live through this, I'm opening a restaurant." The old man asked, "What'll you call it?" "Dungeon noodles and dry bread." Motto, "Eat once, remember forever." The room erupted in laughter again, their voices mixing with the wind, a choir of despair that still knew how to joke with fate. "Before you drifted off," you murmured, "if I die tomorrow, make sure I get to dream of the feast again." Henri chuckled hoarsely. "Don't worry, I'll save you a seat by the cloud soup pot." By now, the winter's cold was no longer just something that made people shiver. It had become an organized killer. It crept into every pore, slipped into the lungs, and took up residence there like a tenant who never paid rent. And so, after just a few days, almost everyone began coughing, wheezing, and breathing like rusty bellows. Etienne was the first to cough up blood. At first, it was just a small red spot. Then it spread wider, soaking into the straw, blooming like a dreadful abstract painting. But he laughed hoarsely and said, "Look, I just redecorated the floor. Red suits winter, doesn't it?" Someone replied, "Yeah, it really warms the place up." The whole cell broke into dry laughter tangled with coughing. Anyone outside would have thought this was the famous coffin comedy choir of the Middle Ages. The coughing spared no one. Young, old, strong, weak, all of them became instruments in a grand symphony of inflamed lungs. Henri coughed rhythmically, like a drum beat. The old man's cough was long and resonant, almost soulful, like a flute. And you? Your cough was uneven, scattered, but with character, the kind that likes to improvise. "You're off beat again," Henri joked. "That part's a harmony, not a solo." You wheezed out between coughs. "I just want to be creative." Every breath felt like a knife twisting inside your ribs. The cold burrowed deep, and your chest cracked softly each time you coughed too hard. Etienne panted. "My lungs are protesting me being alive." Henri replied, "Tell them to shut up, we've got a concert tonight." The old man rasped a laugh. "My lungs quit long ago. That's why my cough echoes so beautifully." One night, you woke in the middle of a coughing fit, drenched in cold sweat. You could barely see through the dark haze, but there was Etienne, sitting up, clutching his chest, shaking with each ragged breath. You whispered, "Lie down." He shook his head, trembling. "Don't dare. Afraid I won't get back up." You laughed and coughed too. That night, the dungeon filled with an unending chorus of coughs, a melody with no finale. Once, a guard heard the noise, swung the door open, and shouted, "Quiet in there!" But then he recoiled, the icy air rushing in, carrying a sound that wasn't just coughing, it was like the dungeon itself was breathing. He slammed the door shut, muttering, "They'll all be dead soon." Henri coughed and smirked. Hear that? He said it like good news, Etienne croaked. Well, it means his job's almost done. The next morning, one man didn't get up. Everyone looked at him, then at each other. No one cried. In a place where every breath could be the last, death wasn't tragedy anymore, just the end of coughing. Henri laid a hand on the man's chest and whispered, Rest easy, friend. At least you don't have to sing in this choir anymore. The sickness spread fast. Now everyone breathed hard. Each time wind slipped through the cracks, the whole dungeon winced together like one wounded beast. You lay still, watching the pale mist of your breath rise and fade. That's my soul, you thought, just practicing how to fly before it really leaves. And yet, despite the pain, despite the fire in their lungs, everyone kept trying to laugh, to joke. Maybe because silence made it too easy to hear their hearts giving up. Etienne said, If I die, bury me somewhere warm. Henri replied, The only warm spot here's the wall with bird droppings. Want me to save it for you? Etienne burst out laughing and coughed so hard his eyes watered. It's fine, he gasped between breaths. At least, I still have laughter. That night, as the wind howled through the iron bars again, the coughing, the laughter, and the wind blended together a rough, cracked symphony, tragic and funny all at once, the kind only those still alive in hell could understand. You listened, smiling faintly. If I die tomorrow, you whispered, I want to hear this song one last time. It's so good, even God would start coughing. The dungeon now looked less like a prison and more like an infirmary in hell, a place where patients had to play doctor and medicine came in the form of faith. The weak ones found a wall to lean against, curled up in straw, silent as cold stones. Those still strong enough only glanced over. No one dared get close. Not out of cruelty, but because everyone knew touch the dying, and you might as well send an invitation to death himself. In the farthest corner, where rotten straw and shadow melted into one solid darkness, lay a young prisoner named Louis. He used to be strong, wild, the kind who'd shout at the guards, I'm not afraid of death. Now Louis had a breath so faint that if you didn't look closely, you'd think he was sleeping, very deeply. Etienne watched him for a while and whispered, He's probably meditating. Henri gave a dry chuckle. Yeah, meditating his way straight out of existence. The others had started, avoiding that corner. No one said it, but every day they sat a little farther away, as if the cold there was different, thicker, heavier, the kind that could crawl up your skin if you got too close. You found it strange. Just yesterday, Louis had asked you for a crumb of bread, joking, saving it for a fancy dinner. That dinner was probably being served in the afterlife by now. After a while, Etienne glanced around and murmured, Should we check if he's still breathing? Henri shook his head. If he's alive, he'll cough to protest. And if he's not, then he won't complain either. They looked at each other and laughed that tired, bitter kind of laugh that comes from being afraid and pitying someone at the same time. That night, as wind hissed through the cracks, Louis stayed motionless. Etienne tugged your sleeve and whispered, If he's really dead, what should we do? You raised an eyebrow. Give the spot a name. What name? The Frost Resort, Room 1. Henri, overhearing, burst out laughing. Perfect. Tomorrow we'll open Room 2. I'll book early. The cell erupted in hoarse laughter, the kind that even the cold couldn't choke out. Someone said, At least he's at peace. No more coughing, no more shivering, no more dreaming of bread. Etienne muttered softly, Yeah, and no more hearing me sing. Lucky him, Henri added, and everyone laughed again, rough and real. The next morning, Louis was truly gone. The guard came, dragged the body away as usual. No one asked a thing. When the door slammed shut, Etienne looked at the sunken spot in the straw and said quietly, See that? He's gone, but that place still feels colder than the rest. Henri nodded. Of course, he left behind his negative aura. You added, If anyone sleeps there and survives, I'll canonize him on the spot. That afternoon, a younger, bolder prisoner announced, I'll sleep in Louis' spot. Let's see what's so scary about it. Everyone shouted, Don't! You trying to speedrun your death? He grinned and shot back. "If I'm alive by morning, I'll start charging rent." The others looked at one another, half admiring, half afraid. That night, no one slept. They just lay there, listening to the wind, the coughing, and the soft rustle of straw in that dark corner. Come morning, the man was still alive. He jumped up, grinning. "See? No ghost there." Henri gave him a side-eye. "No ghost, maybe, but you might be getting recruited as one soon." "I'm fine, look." "Sure, like a candle right before it burns out." The cell burst into laughter again, longer this time because someone had lived through the night. From that day on, Louis's corner became a legend. Anyone weak, coughing, or looking hopeless got teased. "Careful, you might get promoted to the VIP suite soon." Someone joked. All-inclusive package. Meals, bed, and a one-way trip. Just no return policy. And in that frozen world where life was as fragile as breath, jokes like that were what kept them from turning to stone. Because here, when death sleeps right beside you, sometimes the only way not to fear it is to laugh with it, even if it's through cracked lips and a dying breath. When darkness finally swallowed the stone dungeon, every sound seemed to melt together. The wind hissed through the cracks, slid between the frozen bars, curled around the walls, and rose up like a broken flute. Each time it howled, you couldn't tell anymore where the wind ended and the groaning began. That sound, half laughter, half weeping, was the only music of the night, played to the rhythm of breath and the despair of those still alive. Etienne lay curled up, trembling in waves. Each breath of his sounded like a dead leaf being dragged by the wind. "I think the wind is mocking me," he whispered. Henri replied, "No, it's singing you a lullaby, a perk for those about to get a fever." The whole room chuckled weakly. Their laughter, hoarse and hollow, drifted away with the wind like a joke told at a funeral. Tonight's symphony had more instruments than usual. The wind was the strings, the groans were the bass, and the coughs kept time. You heard Etienne cough, then Henri respond, then another man moan. The sounds followed one another, perfectly in sync, without a conductor hauntingly steady. At moments, it felt like the dungeon itself was singing. A song without lyrics, without a voice, but so sorrowful it made your chest tighten. An old prisoner, who might once have been a musician, rasped out a laugh. "I swear, if Beethoven had lived in our time, he'd have used us for background music in Tragic Symphony No. 99. Etienne snorted. "If he were here, he'd write Wind in D minor and Moans in Major." Henri added, "And I'll handle the chorus cough sonata for the lungs." The whole dungeon burst into laughter, their cracked voices blending with the wind like a string being plucked in a fogged-up hall. Between bursts of laughter, the wind kept howling. But strangely, the sound that once froze your blood now felt familiar. It was a reminder that they weren't dead yet, because only the living could still hear the wind. You lifted your face, inhaled deeply, felt the cold slice through your chest, and said, "Hearing this means I'm still here. Silence would be worse." Henri nodded. "Right. When the wind stops, we'll know we've crossed over." After a while, Etienne whispered weakly, "If I die, play this song for me." "Which one?" "Groans and Wind." "You want a conductor?" "No. Death comes with its own timing." Laughter rippled through the room, rough, broken, but real. The night dragged on endlessly. The wind wouldn't rest, and no one slept. Every cough, every groan, every ragged breath echoed between the walls and came back again. Sometimes, someone talked in their sleep, calling for their mother, their lover, or just murmuring, "So cold." You listened to it all, like a living symphony where each person was a note raw, fragile, and true. The old prisoner, half asleep, murmured, "I think this dungeon has a soul. Every time I groan, it groans back. Every time I cough, it answers." You smiled. "Then, at least we're not performing solos," Henri added. "Yeah, welcome to the infernal winter choir." The room laughed again, long and loud, until the wind seemed to change rhythm, blowing harder, as if joining in. When the laughter faded, the night's music continued. The wind screamed, men groaned, and water dripped from the ceiling. Ch, 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 like the ticking of death's metronome. And in that moment, you thought, if anyone outside heard this, they'd call it the sound of ghosts. But to us, it's the song of people just trying to survive one more night. You smiled faintly, pulled your torn shirt higher, and whispered, "Play on, wind, and when I fall silent, keep the song going." And in the thick, breathless dark, that strange music went on mournful, broken, and somehow laced with the dark humour of souls who had learned to laugh at their own tragedy. After nights when the wind screamed like the torn cries of lost souls, no one dared claim it was just the wind anymore. Etienne said, his voice trembling. "Did you hear it? Last night, the wind called my name." Henri answered casually. "Yeah, it was probably reciting your hunger debt list." But Etienne didn't laugh. He just stared blankly at the ceiling. "No, it really called me." A voice whispered right by my ear, "Come out, it's warmer here." From that night on, everyone started hearing something in the wind. Henri swore he heard children giggling. The old man said he felt an icy hand rest on his shoulder every time he was about to fall asleep. And you swore that one night, while half asleep, you heard a faint breath right behind your neck. You turned around. No one. Only mist rising like a soul not yet ready to leave. You swallowed hard and whispered, "If you're a ghost, please, share your blanket." From then on, dungeon ghost stories became the hottest topic in that frozen room. Etienne spoke like a scholar. "I think the dead never leave. They linger here, watching, waiting to see who's next." Henri smirked. "If that's true, I'll try talking to them. Maybe I can convince them to share their breadcrumbs." The old man shrugged. "Great. Ask them to tidy the straw while you're at it." One night, the wind howled so violently the whole dungeon trembled. Etienne shot up and screamed, "They're here! They're laughing!" Henri didn't even move, just pulled his shirt over his head. "Let them laugh. As long as they don't take my sleeping spot, I don't care," you muttered. "If ghosts are real, they're probably freezing too cold to scare anyone." But that didn't make anyone feel better. After that, whenever the wind blew hard, everyone hid under the straw, stiff as planks. Everyone except Etienne. He kept whispering into the dark. One night, you heard him murmur, "All right, I'll come, but you promise there's soup?" You opened your eyes, startled. "Who are you talking to?" Etienne turned toward you, eyes glazed. "The man at the door. He says it's warm out there." Henri sat up, alarmed. "If it's that warm, tell him to lend me a blanket first." The cell burst into ragged laughter, laughter that mingled with the wind, turning fear into something almost absurd. A young prisoner joked, "If ghosts are really here, they must be bored to death listening to our coughing all day." Henri nodded. "Yeah, they probably left already," complaining. "I can't take it these guys cough like a choir." The next night, Etienne sat bolt upright, eyes wide. "Do you hear them?" he whispered. "They're whispering again. They want me to come." You laughed, trying to keep it light. "Ask them if they've got bread. I'll come too." Etienne paused, then nodded seriously. They said yes. Henri chimed in. "Tell them to save me a seat. I'll join after dessert." The room erupted in laughter, hoarse, wheezing, but so alive that even Etienne chuckled, exhaling as if letting the cold finally leave his chest. From that night on, when the wind howled, they no longer feared it. Everyone figured, if ghosts truly haunted the dungeon, they were still less frightening than hunger, cold, or waiting. The old man said, "If a ghost wants to take me, I only ask one thing. Take me somewhere with dinner." Etienne added, "I just want a dry bed." Henri concluded, "And I want my ghost to sing This Wind's Been Off Key for weeks." The cold stayed. The wind still screamed. But fear turned into laughter. And in that strange paradox of the dungeon, it was that half-crazy laughter that kept them alive through the devil's own winter, where even the ghosts had to laugh, because the living were better at joking than the dead. One morning so cold that your breath froze mid-air, the old prisoner, the one who'd survived the longest, chuckled, his voice rough and brittle like cooled ash. You know, if you live through 3 winters in here, you stop being human. You go mad. The words came out slow, like a curse. Henri laughed. So tell me, old man, which winter are you on now? The old man scratched his chin, as if actually counting. If I remember right, this should be the 4th. Etienne's eyes widened. So you're mad already? The old man smiled, and there was a strange glint in his eyes. Maybe. But madness has its perks. You stop feeling cold, because your head stays hot. The whole room chuckled dryly, but no one dared look at him for long. In the dim light seeping through the cracks, his face looked both kind and terrifying, like someone who had crossed the threshold of sanity, but hadn't quite stepped through. Etienne joked, So what's it like being mad? Do you get more food? The old man shrugged. No, but you feel full because you start eating your hallucinations. I once saw a man eat a wall, swore it tasted like toast. Henri smirked. If I go mad, I'll eat the guard. He looks tough, probably chewy but satisfying. The whole cell broke into laughter, the kind that gets caught halfway between humour and tragedy. That night, as wind hissed through the cracks, the old man began talking again, his tone softer now, like telling a bedtime story. Long ago, there was a man in this dungeon who survived 3 winters. He didn't die, but after that he started laughing. He laughed all the time, day and night, until the guards had to tie him up because his laughter kept everyone else awake. Henri said, Sounds like a fun guy. The old man narrowed his eyes. Not done yet. When they opened his cell, he was gone. Only his laughter remained echoing through the walls. The air grew colder. Etienne shivered. You're trying to scare us, aren't you? The old man smiled gently. No, just telling the truth. Maybe he's still here, we just haven't heard him yet. Henri scratched his head. So if I do hear laughter tonight, what should I do? Laugh back, the old man said calmly. So he knows you're about to join the club. The answer made everyone burst out laughing. Etienne clutched his stomach, wheezing. If that's the case, I'm already an honorary member. You laughed too, but there was a chill under your skin. Because, truth be told, sometimes in the middle of the night, you also heard faint laughter, soft and far away. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was him. From that day on, 3 winters became the most dreaded phrase in the dungeon. Whenever someone coughed or shook, they'd be teased. Hang in there, not crazy yet. But madness slowly turned into comfort. Henri said, If I do lose it, I'll draw another sun on the wall. 2 suns must be warmer than 1. Etienne nodded. And I'll start talking to the wind. New friend, less boredom. One night, the old man spoke again, almost singing. Madness isn't losing your mind, boys. Madness is when you stop feeling pain. Then he fell silent, his eyes distant. Henri asked softly, And you? Do you still feel pain? The old man smiled thin, but sincere. No. I only feel happy when the wind laughs back at me. The whole dungeon went quiet. The wind outside howled harder, and for a moment you could swear the walls themselves trembled not from the cold, but because they were laughing. You looked at Henri and whispered, If I survive 2 more winters, remind me not to go quiet. Henri nodded, chuckling hoarsely. Don't worry. If you go mad, I'll join you. Misery loves company. After the old man's prophecy, the stone dungeon began to feel more like an asylum than a prison. No one could tell anymore which sounds were coughing, which were laughter, and which were crying. They all blended together into a distorted noise that, if anyone passed by outside, would make them think the people inside were holding a comedy show of despair. Etienne was the one who started the first night of laughter. One evening, no one spoke. The wind howled through the cracks, icy and sharp. Then suddenly, Etienne sat up and started laughing like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. He laughed so hard he rolled across the straw-covered floor, clutching his stomach. Henri panicked. What are you doing? Etienne wheezed between bursts of laughter. I just remembered. When they arrested me, I told the guard, I won't be here long. Ha ha ha. And now I've been here 3 years. The cell went silent for a moment. Then everyone started laughing at once. Not because the joke was funny, but because it was painfully true. The old prisoner patted the stone wall and said, "Go on, laugh. At least your abs will stay warm." Henri frowned. "Warm? How?" "Every time you laugh," the old man said, "your guts rub together. Friction makes heat." From that day on, laughter therapy became the dungeon's new spiritual ritual. Anyone who was sad, tired, or coughing blood was encouraged to laugh. Some laughed dryly, some screamed it out, some laughed until they cried. Henri once declared, "If I die, carve on my grave, laughed till my last breath." Etienne added, "And mine should say, still laughing underground, please don't disturb." But like everything in that place, the laughter didn't last. Laugh too long, and you grow tired. When the laughter ran out, only gasps and sobs remained. Etienne, mid-laugh, suddenly froze. His face stiffened. Then he began to cry, silently, trembling. You watched, uneasy. Henri murmured, "See? The old man was right. He's gone mad." But Henri didn't hold out much longer either. Another night, when the wind roared so hard the door rattled, he burst into wild laughter, then bent double, sobbing. "I'm so tired," he gasped between laughs. "Laughing hurts. Crying's cold. What else is there to do?" Etienne looked at him and said softly, "Breathe." The answer was so absurd that they both started laughing again through tears. You'd been there too. Once you dreamed you'd escaped, walking under sunlight, hearing church bells. When you woke, you laughed, then realized you were still lying on cold stone. The laugh caught in your throat and turned into tears. You didn't know if you were happy or broken anymore. Everything blurred together until your emotions stopped obeying. The old man watched and chuckled. "You know," he said, "in here, crying and laughing are the same. Both make warmth." Then he leaned back and laughed, tears streaming down his cheeks. His laughter echoed off the walls, blending with the wind a mad song someone forgot to end. From then on, no one could tell the difference anymore. When someone laughed, others didn't know whether to join in or comfort them. Sometimes, the whole dungeon laughed like children, then cried like orphans. Etienne said, "We're God's emotional choir, one side laughter, the other side sobbing." Henri replied, "And he's probably up there scratching his head, wondering what kind of song this is." Strange as it was, those tears and laughter kept them alive one more day. Because in that frozen tomb, when reason had long fled, emotion raw and twisted, was the only proof left that they were still human. That night, when everything was silent again, you heard Etienne whisper in the dark, "You know, maybe I'm not afraid of going mad, because madness still feels." Then he chuckled softly, the sound mingling with a sob, with the wind fading away like a half-finished song. Sad, beautiful, and strange enough that even the darkness seemed to listen. When the cold and hunger had pushed beyond what the human body could bear, the mind began inventing prettier things to comfort itself. They say when you die, the soul sees a light at the end of the tunnel. In this dungeon, that light came early only. It wasn't real. Etienne was the first to see it. One night, he suddenly sat up, pointing at the stone wall. "Look, a door! It's open!" Everyone looked up. There was only a faint patch of light coming from a crack high above, slipping through the mist. But Etienne stared at it like he was seeing heaven itself. He trembled. "I see the sun, and my mother. She's calling me home for dinner." Henri sighed. "If your mother's got real bread, tell her to save me a slice." The whole dungeon laughed hoarsely, but no one teased Etienne for long, because soon, one by one, everyone started seeing something. The old prisoner said he saw birds flying by, heard the church choir singing from the village. Henri claimed he saw a blonde woman standing beyond the bars, smiling softly, waving him over. You asked, "Did she say anything to you?" Henri's voice was dreamy. "She said there's warm wine and baked pies outside." "It must be heaven," Etienne muttered. "No, that's a trap." "What kind of angel bakes pies in winter?" A few who still had some sanity left tried to fight the visions by slapping themselves. Henri tried once, smacked his own cheek, then laughed. "That hurt, but she's still there. Maybe I should kiss her before I die." The room burst into laughter, hollow, and echoing through nothingness. At night, the dungeon felt like the bottom of the sea. When someone breathed too hard, the mist rose, curling like smoke. Etienne looked around and whispered, "Do you see them? The souls. They're flying." The old man smiled faintly. "No, that's just our breath. But calling them souls sounds nicer." Henri nodded. "Right. At least our souls have the decency to leave our mouths poetically." And so the visions spread through the cell like an illness. Some saw fire. Some saw the snow stop falling. Some spoke with people long dead. One young man whispered to the air, "Father, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stolen that bread." Etienne replied softly, "It's all right. You shared it with me, that makes it noble." One morning, Henri suddenly stood up, eyes blazing. "The door's open. I'm going out." He walked toward the wall, reaching out his hand. But the wall was as cold and hard as ever. You grabbed him back. "There's nothing there, Henri." He turned to you, smiling strangely. "Yes, there is. You just don't want to believe it. There's light, sunlight, and singing." Then he sat down and went silent for a long time. After that, no one talked about the visions anymore. But every now and then, someone's eyes would drift toward the wall where Etienne had once pointed, as if, even knowing it was just imagination, they still needed to believe there was a door, even if only in the mind, to step out of this winter. That evening, as the wind whistled through the iron cracks, the old man smiled and murmured, "Maybe this dungeon has no real door. But who knows, maybe someone will dream deep enough to find the way out." Henri replied, "Then I'm going to bed early tonight. Maybe I'll dream of the door with a sign that says, 'Exit toward the light.'" Everyone laughed. The hoarse laughter echoed through the dark, sounding sad, warm, and somehow like the most beautiful illusion they'd ever had, an illusion that knew how to laugh. One night, when the wind outside howled long and low like a voice calling out, Etienne sat up. He moved slowly, like someone listening to a familiar sound. His eyes shimmered, that strange light you hadn't seen in anyone's eyes since being locked in this place. He whispered, so softly it sounded like he was speaking only to himself, "Mother, she's come to take me home." You opened your eyes, dazed. Henri turned over and murmured, "Again?" He's seeing the glowing door again. Etienne got to his feet and staggered toward the wall, not the iron door, but the darkest corner of the dungeon, where not a trace of light could reach. "Hey, Etienne, come back," you called quietly. "That's just a wall." But he didn't hear you. He kept walking, smiling faintly. "No, I see sunlight, fields, fresh bread, and butter too." Henri started to rise, then froze. In the dim light, Etienne no longer looked human, just a shadow drifting toward the blackest part of the room. The old prisoner whispered, "Don't. Let him go. Maybe he's really found the way out." Etienne reached the wall. There was a dull thud as his hand touched stone, but he didn't react. He only smiled, murmuring as if to someone on the other side, "I'm home, Mother." Then he collapsed light as a dry leaf. The whole cell fell silent. Only the wind sighed through the cracks in the iron door. Henri stepped forward, touched Etienne's shoulder. It was cold as stone. He swallowed hard. "He's gone," the old man said quietly. "Yeah, maybe he really did see the door. The rest of us, we're just not mad enough to see it yet." No one said another word. You looked around, everyone's eyes were red. Not from grief exactly, but from envy. Etienne was the first to escape, though by a path none of them wanted to take. Henri murmured, "If there really is light on the other side, I hope he's saving us a spot." The old man nodded. "And baking an extra loaf of bread. It's starving in here." The next morning, the guard came, dragged his body away as usual. When the iron door clanged shut, the dungeon stayed silent, but something felt missing, like the air itself had lost a familiar breath. You looked at the corner where Etienne had fallen. A thin sliver of light from a crack in the wall shone there, just enough to mark the spot. Everyone saw it, but no one dared say a word. From that day on, no one spoke of visions again. But each night, when the wind whispered through the bars, everyone's eyes drifted toward that corner where Etienne had stepped through. Henri would murmur, "If I ever see that glowing door, I'll go too." The old man smirked. "You go first. I'll stay back and keep the bed warm." And so it became a reflex whenever the wind whistled through the cell. Someone would quietly say, "Etienne, is it warm over there?" There was never an answer. But sometimes you could swear you saw a faint shimmer of light dance on the wall just for a second. Henri noticed once and laughed softly. "He's probably baking bread over there." You nodded, smiling back, and for a fleeting moment you felt warm. Only no one ever dared to step too close to that corner again. Because maybe, just maybe, if you got close enough, you'd see that same door and walk through it like Etienne. In the days after Etienne left, the dungeon fell into a strange kind of silence. No one talked anymore. The hoarse laughter was gone. The foolish jokes that once fought back despair disappeared. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of souls slowly hollowing out. You no longer remembered what day it was. No one in the cell did. Henri had once tried scratching marks into the wall to count, but he gave up. "I can't tell if I'm counting the days I've lived or the days I've died," he said. "And both feel equally long." The old prisoner sighed. "What's the point of counting now? If you wake up, you're still alive. That's enough." Memories began to fade like paintings buried under fog. Henri once said he used to be a blacksmith. But now, holding a piece of stone, he stared at it blankly, unable to remember how to make a hammer. You were the same. You tried to recall a face from the outside, someone's smile, someone's hug, but all that came to you were blurs, fragments, dissolving like smoke. Each person in the dungeon seemed to lose a piece of themselves every day. One morning, Henri woke and asked you, "What's my name again?" You laughed, thinking he was joking, until you saw his face, puzzled and frightened, like a lost child. You stayed quiet. After a moment, he smiled faintly. "It's fine. Names don't matter. No one listens when you call anyway." People started to forget how to speak. Words came out slowly, broken. Instead of saying, "I'm hungry," Henri would point to his stomach. Instead of saying, "It's cold," you'd just hunch your shoulders. Language, the last thing that made them different from beasts, was eroding, along with their minds. One afternoon, the old man let out a dry laugh. "You ever notice? The cold here has memory. It remembers every shiver I've ever had. And me? I've forgotten everything." Henri murmured, "Yeah, maybe it's living for us now." And truly, it seemed the cold was the only thing left alive. It crept through everything, the walls, the breath, the memories. You could feel it not just on your skin, but in your thoughts, inside your mind. Whenever you tried to remember something warm, your head went blank, filled only with the spreading chill. At night, you looked around. Everyone just sat there, eyes open, staring into nothing. No one spoke. No one dreamed. They only breathed thin, cold, empty breaths. You thought, maybe we're not alive anymore. Maybe we're just blocks of ice that still remember how to breathe. Henri whispered suddenly, his voice barely there. "Do you think it's possible to forget how to die?" You gave a raspy laugh. "Maybe. We've forgotten everything else." Your laugh echoed faintly, dissolving into the air like mist. You tried to remember who you were, what your name was, where you came from, but no answer came. Only one thing remained certain: the cold. The cold needed no memory, because it was the memory, the last trace of those the world had already forgotten. No one remembered exactly when it started. Only that one cold morning, just like every other, Henri sat up, looked around, and asked in a calm, almost casual voice, "Hey, who are we?" No one answered, not because they didn't want to, but because none of them knew anymore. You tried to speak, but as your mouth opened, your own name slipped away. It vanished into the fog of your mind, leaving only a hollow silence, cold and still. Henri gave a faint laugh, the kind of laugh that belongs to someone who's just discovered the world's cruelest joke. "Turns out we don't need names to live. Here, all we need to know is how to breathe." The old prisoner nodded, his voice rasping like dry wood. "Names are for being called. And here, no one calls anymore." And so, the names, those fragile proofs of a life once lived, began to fade. Etienne was gone, but even his name, after a few days, dissolved from memory. No one remembered who he'd been, only that someone had left through the wall. You You tried to recall your own name, your parents, your hometown, but the harder you tried, the more it hurt a stabbing pain behind your eyes. Eventually you gave up. Maybe it was better this way. After all, who would call you? Who was left to hear? Henri started giving everyone strange nicknames. Hey, coffee, pass me that piece of bread. Yo, chilly teeth, you still breathing? The cell erupted into hoarse laughter, the kind that sounds like it's falling apart, yet still real. The true names were gone, replaced by ones born out of habit, humour, and the faint warmth of shared breath. One day, the guard opened the door, tossed in a few crumbs of bread, and muttered, "These ones are almost dead." Henri looked up at him, smiled weakly, and asked, "Do you know who I am?" The guard frowned. "A prisoner. Who else?" Henri nodded. "Good. At least someone remembers." That line made everyone laugh, short, cracked laughter, but genuine. For a few seconds, they felt real again, not through names, not through memories, but through the sound of laughter echoing against the stone. That night, you sat against the wall, trying to remember everything. The world outside, loved ones, voices, sunlight. But it all drifted away, dissolving like mist in the wind. You whispered, "If I can't remember who I am I still human?" The old man answered without opening his eyes, "Yes, as long as you still know you're cold." You laughed. It was true, the cold was the last identity left. It didn't forget you. It didn't leave you. It didn't betray you. From that day on, no one asked names anymore. When someone coughed, others looked up and nodded. When someone breathed a little too hard, someone else closed their eyes in silent reply, a quiet acknowledgement of existence. No more Henri, no more Etienne, no more me or you. Only faint silhouettes, huddled in the dark, sharing a single name, the cold ones. And then, at some point, they stopped fearing everything except fear itself. It buzzed around their minds like a frozen fly still trying to move, its droning hum enough to drive anyone mad. At first, they feared death. Then, they feared life. Now, they feared silence because whenever the dungeon grew too quiet, they thought maybe they'd already died without realizing it. Henri once said, "I'm not afraid of ghosts. I'm just afraid of waking up and finding no one left to argue with." It sounded like a joke, but it wasn't. In that cell, the only proof they had of being alive was the sound of someone else breathing. Etienne was gone, their names were gone, and all that remained was the rhythm of breath blending with the wind. You lay there listening to Henri's wheezy breathing like air leaking from a rusty forge. You muttered, "If you go quiet, I'll kick you. Don't you dare die halfway through." Henri sighed. "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you." The two of you laughed hoarsely, then coughed, then laughed again like a pair of old bellows, stubbornly proving they could still work. The emptiness wasn't loud anymore. It crept like fog, seeping into everything. You stared at the wall and felt as if you were staring into the empty chambers of your own mind, grey, solid, with no way out. Sometimes you wondered, if someone opened the door right now, would I even step out? Then you answered yourself, probably not. It's colder out there. The old prisoner heard that and burst out laughing, coughing as he did. You're right. At least in here there's human warmth. Step outside and you'll freeze into a statue. Henri chimed in. If I freeze to death, carve on my grave. Stayed behind too scared of wind to fear ghosts. Everyone laughed again, a dry, cracking laughter that somehow felt warm, like damp wood still hiding a trace of ember. Between the coughs and the crooked smiles, that laughter became the only thing left that could fight off the emptiness spreading around them. You realized that maybe their souls had frozen solid, but at least there was still one small corner left, just big enough to hold a laugh, brief and trembling, like the sound of stones striking together. And so they kept on living, not for hope, not for memory, but simply because none of them wanted to be the last one left to hear the wind. One night, colder than any before, the cold stopped being air and turned into something alive. It crawled across the stone floor, slipped through the cracks, wove through the straw, and crept into every breath. Everyone lay still, eyes wide open in the dark, listening to the faint thump of each other's weakening hearts. Then, through that suffocating silence, came a sound soft as a falling hair. A voice. No one knew where it came from. There were no clear words, only a wavering hum, sometimes distant, sometimes near. At first, everyone thought it was the wind. But the wind has no rhythm. The wind doesn't hesitate. This sound did. It had rhythm. It had soul, as if someone was singing. An old, far-away song, so sad it made you forget the cold. Henri lifted his head, eyes wide like a child's. You hear that? It's singing, real singing. The old prisoner frowned. If anyone's singing in a place like this, he's twice as mad as we are. Henri chuckled. Then he's a good friend of mine. They lay silent after that. The voice kept flowing, drifting across the four walls like thin smoke. Sometimes it dropped low, like a mother's lullaby. Sometimes it rose, like the cry of a trapped soul. You listened, feeling a strange ache, fear and longing tangled together. You didn't know why, but your eyes burned. Maybe it was just that it had been so long since you'd heard something soft. The wind outside kept blowing, carrying snow, and the song seemed to ride with it. Someone whispered, "Maybe it's an angel." Another muttered, "What kind of angel sings in a dungeon? Then it must be a ghost." Henri snorted. "A ghost with a voice that beautiful? If that's true, I'll gladly be haunted every night." Then, as if teasing them, the singing stopped. The silence that followed felt like falling into a pit. The old man murmured, "That proves it was real." The wind wouldn't stop right at the high note. Henri gave a dry laugh. "Maybe he got shy after we complimented him," you whispered. "Or maybe he's listening to us." The next night, the voice returned closer this time. Everyone sat up, heads tilted, trying to find its source. It came from down the corridor, where the torchlight flickered, casting trembling shadows. Henri stood, stepped to the bars. "Hey," he called softly. "Sing again." No reply came, only another short verse, then silence once more. From that night on, they waited for it. It became routine, a ritual. Whenever the wind began to howl, they'd lie still, holding their breath, waiting for the voice. Some nights it came, some nights it didn't. Henri joked, "Maybe the singer's rehearsing." The old man replied, "Or maybe the crowd in the afterlife booked him for a tour." One night, the singing came clearer than ever. This time, everyone recognized it. It was a woman's voice, smooth, gentle, but trembling. The tune echoed, like someone singing from a distant place, cold, lonely, and just as trapped. "My God," you whispered. "It could be a prisoner from the next cell." Henri clasped his hands together. "If it is, I swear I'll marry her when I get out." The old man laughed hoarsely. "Why wait? Get married here. I'll be the witness." The whole dungeon burst into laughter for the first time. Laughter came before the song could end. They laughed, they coughed, then they listened again. The song continued, as if responding. "See?" Henri whispered. "She heard me." You smiled faintly. Or maybe the wind enjoys a good audience. But then, one night, the voice didn't return. The cell was left with only moans, the wind and dripping water. Henri kept waiting, lifting his head each night, hoping. A week passed, then two, no sound, but breathing. One morning, the guard opened the next cell and dragged out a body. A woman, long hair, eyes closed, face peaceful, as if asleep. Henri stood at the bars, staring silently. The old man sighed. "So, the song's over." Henri smiled faintly. "No, she just changed stages. She's probably singing for the angels now." The line made everyone chuckle, but their eyes stung. After that, no one sang. Yet sometimes, when the wind slipped through the bars, that voice seemed to return, faint, hazy, like the breath of someone just waking from a dream. You closed your eyes and whispered to Henri, "Do you hear that? I think she's singing again." Henri smiled softly, eyes closed. "Yeah, maybe it's just for me." Both of you stayed quiet, listening to the wind, to your hearts, to the sound that might not even exist. After so many months curled up between cold stone and dying breaths, the survivors in the dungeon had somehow become close, in a strange, impossible way. Not because they liked each other, but because there was no one left to hate. In a place where loneliness could make your mind explode, even the man who once stabbed you in the chest now felt as precious as a thin blanket. Henri used to hate the old prisoner for his badly timed sarcasm. When they first met, the two had fought because the old man said, "You cough too loud, sounds like a dying cow." Henri replied with a punch that made the old man's nose bleed. But now, whenever Henri coughed, the old man would gently pat his back and mutter, "Try to cough quieter, save some energy, to curse me later." Henri laughed hoarsely and grabbed his hand. "If you die first, I'll curse for both of us." And you, who had spent weeks in silence, never speaking to anyone now, couldn't stand it when one of them went quiet for too long. Once, Henri lay still for 2 hours, not moving, and you poked him softly. "Hey, are you dead yet?" He opened his eyes, weakly. "Not yet, just practicing." You sighed. "Well, stop practicing. There aren't enough people to talk to. Die, and we'll hate you for it." That made him laugh, coughing so hard he almost couldn't breathe. "See? You just brought me back to life. Friendship in the dungeon didn't need vows or grand gestures. It was built from the smallest things: a shared breath, half a piece of dry bread, a dumb joke that somehow warmed an entire night. They didn't care who the other had been or what crimes they'd committed. Once, the old prisoner confessed, "I used to be a highway robber. I even beat children for bread." Henri laughed through his cracked voice. "Well, karma found you. Now even kids wouldn't give you bread." Everyone laughed. You added, "It's fine. You can rob me as long as you share the bread after." The old man looked at the tiny piece in his hand and nodded. "All right, I'll share. But if you drop it, I'll cry." Sometimes they told each other stories, though no one could remember them fully. Henri would talk about a blacksmith's daughter he once loved, but halfway through he'd forget her name. The old man would interrupt. "Maybe her name was Hammer, fits your trade." Henri replied, "Yeah, and she probably found a man with more firewood than me." The laughter came again, hoarse but real, mixing with the whistling wind through the bars, sounding like the music of madmen who refused to die. You suddenly realized that these people, who had nothing in common but suffering, had become closer than brothers. They needed so little, just to wake up and see someone still there, to hear another cough, another insult, another breath that wasn't their own. One night, Henri whispered, "If I die, don't sit in silence. Sing, tell a story, curse me. I don't care, just don't let the cell go quiet." You answered, "Fine, but promise you won't die first. I hate talking to myself." Henri smiled a crooked but strangely warm smile. "Then I'll try to outlive you, just to keep my word." The next morning, they shared their last piece of dry bread. The old man broke it into 3 equal parts, smiling. "Split in 2, it's small. Split in 3, it's hopeless. But at least sharing feels better than eating alone." Henri said, "If anyone else survives, we'll split it again." The old man chuckled. "Then each of us will only have the smell of bread left." You added, "That's fine. The smell is still hope." And so, in that winter of death trapped between ice and darkness, they found warmth in things that shouldn't have mattered. Not fire, not food, not light, but a strange kind of friendship, born from people who should have hated each other. In the dungeon, a man could forget his name, his home, even his reason for living, but never the feeling of another hand holding his own. Even if that hand was cold, trembling, and thin as bone, it was proof they hadn't been completely abandoned by the world. And sometimes that was enough: one breath beside you, one crooked smile, one foolish joke, to make those who'd lost everything want to live just one more day. The cold had gone so far it wasn't even a feeling anymore. It had become part of their flesh, seeping into every bone, lying still inside their hearts. No one talked much now, because every time they opened their mouths, their breath turned to mist and froze mid-air like a thread of silver fog. So, to save energy, they learned to keep warm with that very breath. Henri was the first to try. One night, he pulled the straw blanket over both of you and rasped, "Don't get me wrong, I don't love you, but if I don't move closer, I'll die first." You chuckled. "It's fine, as long as you don't snore." He replied, "I only snore when I dream of roast meat." Both of you laughed hoarsely, your breaths colliding, creating a pale cloud warmer than any fireplace you'd ever known. Then the rest followed. At first, everyone was embarrassed, but once they realized that human skin was softer than stone, that embarrassment melted faster than hot bread. The old prisoner wedged himself between you and Henri, muttering, "If my wife could see this, she'd die again of jealousy." Henri laughed. "If she's still alive, I'll give her the spot in the middle." The old man replied, "No, she's cold-hearted, she'd freeze the whole dungeon solid." Laughter rippled through the room again, weak, but warm, like a faint ember in a bed of ash. By day, when faint light slipped through the cracks, they'd collect the tiny shards of ice forming on the walls and ceiling. No one called it water, they called it the wine of life. Each man held his shard carefully, waiting for it to melt, drop by drop. Henri said, "I've never tasted such fine liquor distilled by human breath, filtered through fog, served in the palm of your hand." "Exquisite." The old man nodded. "Yeah, and the aftertaste lasts 15 seconds. Everyone burst out laughing. Once, you held a small drop of water in your hand, trembling in the light. You lifted it high and said softly, "Cheers, my friends." The room echoed, "Cheers." And everyone lifted their hands to their mouths, swallowing that single drop as if swallowing the last trace of life itself. They had no bread, no meat, but they had rituals. Whenever ice melted, they shared it evenly. Whoever got more than one drop had to tell a joke to make up for it. Henri's jokes were terrible, but everyone laughed until they wheezed. A priest, a thief, and a prisoner walk into a tavern. "Stop right there," the old man cut in. "Any story that starts in a tavern without real wine is a disgrace to art." Henri chuckled, eyes closed. "Then imagine the wine like we imagine the feast." You added, "Yeah, just thinking of baked bread makes me feel warm already." That warmth didn't come from heat, it came from closeness. They leaned against each other, breaths mingling, hearts sinking, and for a fleeting moment they forgot they were prisoners at all. The wind whistled through the bars, but it no longer sounded cruel. It was just wind outside an old house, where strangers huddled together to survive the winter. One night, Henri whispered, his voice rough from coughing, "You know, we're like a fire. If we drift apart, we go out." You replied, eyes lost in the dark, "Yeah. And if anyone still has warmth left, they have to pass it on, even just a little." The old man chimed in, half joking, half sincere, "Then I'll be the firewood. I'm old enough for it." His line made you both laugh, and the wind carried that laughter through the room like it was spreading heat. As the night faded, they stayed close, listening to the faint, honest rhythm of each other's hearts. In that shared breath, they no longer thought about freedom, tomorrow, or death. They only thought, as long as someone is beside me, winter hasn't won yet. And so, in that stone tomb of a dungeon, they created the only warmth the outside world could never understand. A warmth born not from fire, but from the last remaining kindness still beating in human hearts. No prayers, no tears, no screams. In the stone dungeon, death had stopped being an event. It was just a breath fading out, a sound swallowed by the wind. But every time someone was about to go, everyone knew. No one had to say a word. A strange silence would spread, thick like fog. The dying one would lie still, eyes sunken, breathing in short, broken gasps, and the rest would simply watch, saying nothing as if waiting for the inevitable. Henri was the first to say what no one dared to admit. When someone dies, "I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of being the one left behind." His words made everyone smile faintly, but it was a crooked, trembling smile. You knew he meant it. Here, it wasn't the cold that killed, it was the loneliness. One night, the old prisoner struggled to breathe, his coughs fading into silence. Henri crawled over, placed a hand on his chest, and whispered, "Hey, old man, if you're planning to go, take your time so I can say goodbye." The old man opened his eyes and smiled weakly. "I'm not going anywhere, just resting a bit." Then his hand slipped from Henri's and slowly turned cold. Henri held on, squeezing tighter, not out of grief, but out of fear that if he let go, the room would grow emptier, and the wind would find one more space to creep into. No one slept that night. The wind howled, the straw rustled, and Henri sat there unmoving, his fingers still gripping that frozen hand. You whispered. "You can let go now," Henri answered, voice shaking. "Not yet. If I let go, I'll have to remember I'm still alive. And I don't want to remember that right now." The next morning, the guard came, opened the door, and dragged the old man's body out like a sack of spoiled potatoes. Henri watched, hollow-eyed, then muttered, "At least last night, I held his hand. Warmer than stone." You nodded, saying nothing. But you understood in this place. Holding someone's hand wasn't about saying goodbye. It was about making sure some trace of human warmth still existed. From then on, whenever someone weakened, the others took turns sitting beside them. No words, no prayers, just sitting there, hand in hand, sharing warmth as fragile as smoke. Sometimes, someone would joke in a raspy voice, "Hey, when I go, hold my left hand, all right? I'm saving my right for the imaginary soup tonight." Laughter filled the room, tired but real, as if they were telling death himself, "We're not done yet." Another time, Henri burned with fever, shaking like a dry leaf. You sat by him, held his hand, and said softly, "You're not allowed to go before me. Who'll tell me bad jokes if you do?" Henri opened his cracked lips and croaked, "If I die, I'll tell jokes through the wind. You just make sure to listen." You smiled faintly. "Fine, but no old stories. I'm sick of them." He laughed weakly, coughed so hard he nearly broke himself in half, then whispered, "Don't worry, I'll use my ghost voice next time." The joke made you laugh, but it also made your eyes sting, because when someone could joke with death, it meant they were standing right on its edge. Over time, those handholds became a ritual. When anyone neared the end, someone else would quietly move closer and take their hand, not out of pity, but out of fear of what it felt like to have empty hands. Someone once said, "Hold my hand, not to keep me here, just so I remember I existed." Henri replied, "Fine, but promise you won't drag me with you." And so, in that ice-cold tomb, among the wind's howls and dripping water, those frail souls maintained a single invisible thread, the thread of human touch, of warmth, of a fear too deep to name. Because in the end, death wasn't as terrifying as opening your eyes and finding no one left to hold your hand. After months of counting time by drips of water, coughs, and breaths, death was no longer an enemy. It was like a familiar guest who came regularly, knocking softly, asking gently, "Whose turn is it now?" And strangely, no one was afraid anymore. On the contrary, whenever someone left, the ones who remained looked after them, not with sadness, but with a glint of envy in their eyes. One long night, Henri said, "If dying feels as warm as sleeping, I'd go right now. But listen, I want to die in a dream, not choking like that old man did." You laughed. "Don't worry, I'll sing you a lullaby." Henri smirked. "You sing so badly, I'll stay alive just to avoid hearing it." A small laugh echoed faint but alive like a flower blooming among cold stones. Death came without warning. Someone would simply close their eyes a bit longer, breathe a bit weaker, and then silence. No cries, no struggle, just stillness. And in that moment, everyone understood that person had reached the place where the wind no longer howled, where no one had to shiver anymore. At first, they still tried to wake the dead, shaking their shoulders, calling their names, even teasing, "Get up, you haven't shared today's ice water yet." But soon they realized that person couldn't hear. Henri would say, "Let him sleep. He's dreaming of the sun now." After that, death stopped being an ending. It became a long sleep worth waiting for. Each time someone passed, the others would softly whisper, "Sleep well. If you see bread, eat some for me." Then they would laugh, laughing through tears, laughing in the wind as if sending a friend off on an early train to the land of light. Some nights, Henri would stare at the ceiling and whisper, "Do you see them? They're all gone now. Probably sitting around a fire, eating real bread instead of crumbs like us." You answered, "Yeah. Maybe they're singing too, that song we heard that night." Henri smiled. "When I go, I'll ask them to sing it for you." You didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because here, death wasn't tragic anymore, it was the only fair thing left. In this place, the strong, the weak, the good, the wicked, all eventually went to the same place. When Henri drifted off one night under a gentle wind, you held his hand and felt it grow cold. No one called, no one cried. You just whispered, "Sleep well, my friend. Don't forget to sing that song." Then you leaned against the wall, closed your eyes, and for a fleeting moment you felt a strange peace. Because for the first time in all these winters, death wasn't frightening anymore. It felt like a warm blanket laid over a soul that had finally grown tired. That winter never seemed to end. The snow still fell, the wind still howled, and the dungeon was still thick with cold and the smell of what was left of the living. The room that had once been crowded was now home to only a few faint figures moving slowly, like ghosts that hadn't yet realized they could stop breathing. Henri was gone. The old man was gone. Only you remained, along with two others, a grey-haired man and a young boy no one remembered the name of. No one spoke anymore. You simply looked at each other with eyes that held nothing but emptiness. Every morning you woke unsure whether you were dreaming or still alive. Feelings had faded like mist on stone. When one of them fell over, you'd just turn your head, look, and then look away again, too tired to feel sorrow. Death had become part of the daily routine, like the dripping water or the sound of the wind. The young one sometimes still talked to himself. One day he said, "When I get out of here, I'll plant an apple tree. Where there's snow, there will be flowers." You rasped. "Sure, and plant a few potatoes too." He smiled, a weak but genuine smile. The next day, he was silent forever. You didn't bury him. You didn't cry. You just dragged his body to a dark corner, out of habit, then sat back down, staring at nothing, thinking, "I guess my turn is coming soon." And strangely, you weren't afraid, because fear had died long ago along with the last friends of that endless winter. That morning, you thought you were dreaming. A strange light slipped through the crack in the iron door, cutting across the grey air, making the dust shimmer like ash. The brightness hurt your eyes, a feeling you'd forgotten for months. At first, you thought it was another illusion, like the bright door Etienne once saw. But no, this light was real, warm, soft, carrying the scent of damp earth. You heard birds, water trickling somewhere, the sound of snow melting into a stream so familiar it felt foreign. Your body trembled, not from cold, but from something that felt like hope clawing its way out of your chest. You lifted your face toward the light, staring at it for a long while, and laughed a hoarse, cracked laugh. "The sun, huh? I thought you'd forgotten me." Your voice echoed. No one answered. You stepped closer, laid your palm on the wall, feeling the warmth seep through the cracks in the stone. Spring had come late, broken, but still come. Yet in the dungeon, that joy was hollow, because you were the only one left awake to see it. The others were still sleeping through the winter forever. You whispered to them, softly, "Hey, you guys, the sun's back." No answer. Only the light spreading, touching the withered bodies, and one living soul sitting there, smiling like a madman who'd just witnessed a miracle. The iron door screeched open, the hinges screaming like metal scraping bone. The guard stepped in, the stench of rot and damp slamming into his face, making him freeze. He lifted his torch. Its light fell on hollow faces, sunken eyes, hair matted like dead grass. Bodies sat motionless, like stone statues. One still alive, you slowly turned your head. The torchlight flickered in your eyes, and the guard stumbled back a step. You looked at him and rasped a crooked smile. "Welcome," you said, "to the graveyard of the living." He shuddered. He counted. 12 had been locked inside. Now only 3 were breathing. The rest curled like dried husks. He turned away, muttering, "Are they even alive anymore?" He threw a few loaves of bread inside, but no one moved. You said quietly, with a tired smile, "You're too late. We already ate the winter." The guard glanced around, saw the first sunlight slipping through the cracks, shining on the still bodies that looked like they were sleeping. He shivered, slammed the door shut, as if afraid the light might carry the dungeon's curse out with it. You stayed there, watching the beam of light fade away, thinking, "The door's open, but no one needs to leave anymore. When the guard left, silence returned. The three who remained, including you, sat against the wall, staring at the bright patch near the door. No one spoke. No one cried. No one smiled. Emotion had died with the winter. You looked at your hands, dry, cracked, stained with old blood, but you didn't feel pain. Everything seemed unreal. The wind slipped through the cracks, and you closed your eyes. But instead of cold, you felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow, no hope. Someone beside you whispered, "Do you think we're still human?" You answered flatly, "No, we're what's left of being human." Both of you smiled faintly, not with sound, just trembling lips. Souls had frozen long ago here. What remained was instinct to breathe, to see, to wait. The sun might light up the stone walls again, but it couldn't reach minds shattered by cold, hunger, and solitude. You leaned your head back against the rock and whispered, "Maybe my soul's still out there somewhere, in the first night of snow." Then you closed your eyes not to dream, only to rest. Years later, they told stories about that stone prison, the place where winter once devoured human souls. Some said one person survived. Some said no one ever truly left. But sometimes, on snowy days, travellers swore they saw a lone figure walking slowly toward the forest, clutching a piece of dry bread, smiling softly as if remembering something long ago. That person never said much. Only one thing: the dungeon didn't kill me. It just took away the human part of me, and gave back the part that knows how to live. They say that when winter winds blow past old prisons, you can still hear coughing, raspy laughter, and a faint voice whispering, "Do you hear it?" She's singing again. Winter has passed. The snow has melted. But that cold, not the cold of weather, but of memory, still lingers. It lives in dreams, in stories retold, in the nights when someone lights a fire in the fog and shivers. They say some winters never end. They just retreat, hiding inside the hearts of those who survived them. And somewhere, buried in the frozen layers of time, the wind from that dungeon still moans softly, a reminder that humans can survive the cold, but never truly escape it.